I remember the night like it was still pressing against my skin. Cold, heavy, the kind that makes you shiver without reason. I was driving the county roads, my cruiser lights cutting through fog that seemed to hang over the asphalt like it was waiting for something. Nights like that always make the world feel smaller, or maybe emptier. I was halfway between towns when I noticed it. A car swaying across the lane, its headlights bouncing like it was alive. At first, I thought maybe the driver was tired, maybe just a little drunk, but then it hit me. The way the car wavered on the edge of the shoulder, fishtailing, then correcting, then fishtailing again. Something about it felt wrong. I flicked on the siren low and hesitant. I didn't want to spook them, didn't want them to do something stupid, but the pattern of the swerving, it was deliberate, erratic in a way that made your stomach sink. I followed it for a few minutes, keeping my distance, counting the gaps in the fog. The car finally drifted too far over the shoulder, and I saw the tires crunch gravel. That's when I decided it was time to stop. I pulled behind it, lights flashing, heart slowing but not completely. There's a rhythm to nights like that, the pulse of fear that mixes with duty. I opened my door, the wind instantly whipping through, biting at my hands and face. The engine of the cruiser hummed low behind me. I stepped onto the shoulder and walked toward the car. It was a black sedan, older model, headlights cutting thin lines across the foggy asphalt. I expected the driver to sit there, maybe fumbling with a phone, shaking their head, blinking too fast. But there was no one. No one. The seat was empty. The air inside the car smelled faintly of old leather and the radio was off. The engine, it was still running. I blinked, expecting to see someone hiding or maybe ducking down, just playing some stupid game. But the interior was empty. I circled the car slowly. Tires on gravel, my boots crunching loud in the quiet night. The fog swirled around me, making the taillights look like small, distant flames. I leaned down, pressed my ear to the window, nothing. No breathing. No movement. Just that quiet hum of the engine. I knocked on the glass. "Ma'am, sir?" My voice sounded small, hollow. Even to me, it sounded like it was coming from far away, swallowed by the fog. Nothing. I stepped back, running my hand over the hood, then the roof, feeling the cold metal, slick with dew. My eyes flicked down the shoulder. Maybe they'd stumbled out, fallen, hidden in the fog. But there were no footprints. Gravel untouched, except for the tracks the car had made. I went around to the driver's side again. The door was locked, but I could see inside clearly through the slightly fogged windows. Empty. Perfectly empty. And then, a sound. Not from the car. From the trees, just past the ditch. A snapping of branches, quick and soft, like someone stepping on brittle twigs. My heart leapt. I spun around. Nothing. Just fog and the dark shapes of pines, their needles brushing against each other in some silent rhythm. I tried the handle. Locked. I rapped on the window harder. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, pale under the cruiser lights. I almost laughed at the absurdity. A swerving car with no driver, engine running, headlights still cutting through fog like nothing had happened. I reached for my radio, fingers trembling. "Dispatch 4 Alpha, I've got a vehicle." Stopped on the highway shoulder. "Driver, missing." "Repeat, driver missing." Static answered me. Then a voice calm. "Copy 4 Alpha. Are you sure they're not hiding?" "Check the shoulder." I glanced around, flashlight sweeping over the gravel, the trees. Nothing. I cursed under my breath. Of course they're not hiding. They're gone. But how do you explain that? I looked back at the car. Headlights still on, engine humming. I leaned closer, nose almost to the glass. The dashboard lights glowed faintly, red needles ticking on dials, the little green indicators still alive. It felt alive, watching, waiting. I decided to open the door, just to check, to be sure. My hand shook as I twisted the handle. Click. It opened easily. I froze. The heat of the engine hit me, the smell of warm leather, faint perfume maybe. My flashlight bounced over the seat, empty. No purse, no jacket, nothing. The seatbelt hung slack. I touched it lightly. It felt wrong, too new. Like someone had left in a hurry or maybe hadn't been there at all. I stepped back, heart hammering. My mind tried to fill in possibilities. Maybe the driver had, what? Jumped into the ditch? Ran into the fog? But why leave the engine running? The lights on? The radio off? Everything was exactly how it should be if someone had just vanished. I crouched down, peering under the car. Gravel pressed into the dirt. No footprints. Not even disturbed dirt. Not even crushed grass. Nothing that suggested a person had walked away. I backed up slowly, feeling a chill run from my spine to the back of my skull. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Something about that car. It held me there rooted, watching, expecting. The fog thickened suddenly, curling around the headlights, softening their edges. My eyes strained, trying to see past the veil, and then I thought I saw it. A shadow, just past the ditch, moving against the fog. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. The night swallowed it. Swallowed me almost. My breath came out in sharp puffs. I reached for my radio again. Dispatch, I need units. Vehicle is engine running, driver missing, static again. Then the calm voice. Unit 4 Alpha, please confirm. Before they could finish, I froze. Behind me, the back seat of the car moved. Just a little. A shift in the leather. My stomach dropped. I spun around, flashlight slicing across the interior. Empty. The back seat was empty. I stepped back, blinked. The car settled, silent again, engine humming. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might wake the whole county. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe minutes, maybe seconds stretched into something else entirely. The fog wrapped around me like a blanket, suffocating, thick, alive. And the car, still there, still humming, still watching. Finally, I forced myself to my cruiser, climbed in, locked the doors. Lights still on, engine still running. I sat there for what felt like forever, trying to make sense of it. Tried to convince myself I'd hallucinated. Maybe fatigue, maybe the fog. Maybe I'd been too long on these roads at night, too long alone. But then the headlights of another car passed, and for a moment, I thought maybe someone had seen it too. Maybe someone would understand. And then it was gone, and the highway was empty again. Silent, except for the hum of my engine. I drove away slowly. Every instinct in me screamed to look back, to see if the car would follow. I didn't. I couldn't. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The empty driver's seat. The locked doors. The humming engine. That sense that someone or something had just slipped away. And the worst part? I had the sinking feeling that the car wasn't empty at all. It was waiting. I couldn't stop thinking about that car. Even after I left the shoulder, even after the night swallowed the shape of it behind a bend, it lingered in my mind like smoke in your lungs. You know it's gone, but it won't leave you. By the time I got back on patrol later that night, I couldn't resist. I had to know. I had to see it again. The fog had thinned slightly, leaving a damp chill that settled into my bones. My cruiser lights barely pierced the mist, but I drove slowly, scanning the shoulders. There it was. Still. Engine running. Headlights dim but alive. Black sedan, like it had been waiting for me to come back. I parked a safe distance away this time. Something told me not to get too close, but curiosity had me climbing out of the cruiser anyway. My flashlight cut a line through the night, fog curling around it. The air smelled colder now, metallic somehow, like iron. The driver's side door was still locked. I circled the car again, boots crunching gravel. That first night I had felt something subtle, a pulse in the air, something that didn't belong. Tonight it was stronger, heavier, and every step I took felt like sinking into it. Then I noticed it. Blood, dark red, thick, partially dried, smeared across the driver's seat. I froze, heart hammering, mind trying to rationalize. Maybe an accident, maybe a nosebleed, maybe someone hurt themselves and ran, but no footprints. Not even a drag mark in the gravel. Nothing leading away from the car. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. The blood wasn't fresh enough to drip, but it was unmistakable. It coated the edge of the seatbelt buckle. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I wanted to call it in immediately, but my voice caught in my throat. There was something else. On the seat, a purse. Leather, worn, small, lying upright as if someone had placed it carefully. I leaned over, fingers itching to touch it, but I didn't. Not yet. It was too deliberate. Someone, or something, had left it there. I circled the car, shining the flashlight over the ground. Gravel, dirt, nothing. No footprints leading to the ditch, the trees, the highway. No indication that anyone had exited. It was as if the driver had evaporated. I opened the passenger side door slowly, listening. Engine hummed. Fog pressed against the windshield, thick, alive, empty. Not a trace of the driver anywhere. My hands were shaking as I finally reached for the driver's side door. The handle was cold, slick with condensation. I pulled it open, and the smell hit me immediately. Coppery, sharp, metallic. Blood. Not just a smear. There were small splatters, tiny drops across the seat, down the side of the console. I shone the flashlight over the seat. My mind refused to make sense of it. How can someone disappear without leaving a mark? How can there be blood and a purse, everything perfectly intact, yet no footprints anywhere? I stepped back, heart thundering, trying to calm my thoughts. Maybe it was a hallucination. Fatigue, fog, stress. It had to be. I leaned closer, trying to examine the blood without touching it. That's when I noticed something else. A faint indentation on the seat. Not from a full body, but something smaller, like a weight had pressed briefly, then been lifted. The air shifted. A breeze? No, it wasn't just wind. It was a movement, subtle, almost playful. Something unseen, just out of reach. My stomach twisted. I checked the rest of the car, seat by seat. Back seat empty, glove compartment empty, trunk locked. The car was normal. Too normal. Engine running, blood in the driver's seat, purse on the seat, and nothing else. I ran my hand over the blood carefully, gloves on because I had to know. Thick, sticky, smelled sharp, metallic. I pulled my hand back, trying to suppress the urge to gag. Whoever had been here, where were they now? I stepped back, flashlight sweeping across the shoulder again. Gravel undisturbed, trees still, fog curling, nothing. The absence of footprints, of disturbance, made my chest tighten. Logic failed. Reason failed. Something impossible had happened here. I reached for my radio, tried to call it in. Fingers trembling. My voice came out small. Dispatch. 4 Alpha again. Vehicle, engine running, driver, blood in the seat. No footprints. I repeat, no footprints. Static. Then, calm. Unit 4 Alpha, please repeat the last statement. I swallowed, trying to keep my composure. Blood. In the driver's seat. Engine running. No footprints leaving the vehicle. Vehicle is, still on the shoulder. A pause. Copy 4 Alpha. Backup units are en route. Please wait in your cruiser and maintain visual. I hung up, heart racing. The minutes stretched into eternity as I waited, flashlight in hand. Every instinct screamed at me to get away, but I couldn't stop looking at that car. The engine hummed steadily, faint lights glowing on the dashboard, blood smeared across the leather. Then I noticed it, small, almost imperceptible. On the floor, near the driver's side, pressed lightly into the carpet. A shoe print? No, not a shoe print. Too small, too irregular. Something like a hand? No, not a hand. Something moved across the seat, I swear, subtle, barely a shift. I stumbled back. My mind spun. Rational thought, logic, common sense, they didn't matter anymore. I wanted to run, but my body felt rooted to the spot, and every part of me screamed at me to understand what I was seeing. I thought about the stories, the warnings from older deputies, strange disappearances, abandoned cars, engine running, drivers gone. I had always dismissed them, until now. A sound made me jump, a soft, scraping noise from inside the car. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear over the engine, but clear in the quiet night. My flashlight swung toward the source. Nothing. Backseat empty, dashboard clear. The blood glimmered under the light, innocuous, yet horrifying. I felt it again, that presence, like someone was still there, watching, waiting. Not hiding, not running, not leaving. Just observing. The backup arrived finally. Lights flashing, engines roaring. I waved them down, hands shaking, and as they approached, the car changed. No, not changed. It just felt different. The engine humming seemed louder. The blood more vivid. The purse lying differently than I remembered. It wasn't possible, but every instinct in me screamed that someone, or something, was still in that car, just beyond my sight. I stayed back while they investigated, trying to tell them everything. But when I described the movement, the shifts, the impossible absence of footprints, their faces went pale, then polite. "We'll check it out, Deputy. Good work noticing it." They didn't understand. No one could. I walked the perimeter again, flashlight trembling in my grip. Engine still running, blood still in the seat, purse still sitting there, everything exactly as it should be if someone had been here, and yet no one had left. I left finally, but the image stayed with me. Not just the blood, not just the empty seat, but the feeling that someone had never actually left the car, that they were still inside, folded into the shadows of the leather, waiting, watching. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the black sedan, engine humming, seat warm with blood that had no source, purse placed just so. And every time I closed my eyes, I felt that presence again, soft, patient, impossible. And the worst part? I could swear it smiled at me. I tried to move on after that night, told myself the investigation was in other hands now, that I'd done my part. But the truth is, the car never left me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. Black sedan, engine humming, blood soaking the driver's seat, purse sitting there like someone had just stepped away for a moment, but no one ever came back. The strangest part was how quickly everyone else wanted to drop it. Paperwork filed, photographs taken, reports written up. They put it down as an unresolved disappearance, like the driver had simply walked away. But I knew better. I was there. I saw the gravel untouched, the grass unbent, the seat shifting when no one was inside. I knew. Nobody ever left that car. Days passed. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, the dreams came. Fog pressing against my windows, headlights cutting through endless dark, and always, always that sound. The quiet hum of an engine idling in the distance. On the fourth night, I got a call. One of the tech guys from the station. He didn't sound right, voice low, cautious, like he was afraid someone else might overhear. "Deputy," he said, "you should come see this." He was talking about the dashcam. My dashcam, from the night I first pulled the car over. I didn't know what he meant until I drove down to the station and he pulled me into a back room. He had the footage queued up on an old monitor, the glow spilling across his pale face. "Watch," he whispered. At first it was exactly as I remembered. My cruiser trailing the swerving sedan, red and blue lights flashing against the fog. The car slowing, drifting onto the shoulder. Me stepping out, walking up with my flashlight, knocking on the window. Then he paused it. His finger hovered over the play button, trembling. Watch the back seat. I frowned. He pressed play again, slow, frame by frame. At first, nothing. Just fog curling across the lens, headlights bouncing. But then, there, movement. In the corner of the back seat, just for a second, the leather shifted, like someone leaning forward. Then it was gone. I felt my chest tighten. "Run it again." He did, slower this time, and I saw it. A shape in the back seat. Human, but not. Too still, too quiet, too wrong. The outline of a head, shoulders, the curve of something leaning close to the glass, watching me as I knocked on the window. But when I'd shone my flashlight inside that night, there was nothing. The seat was empty. My stomach dropped. "That's impossible." He nodded slowly, his face pale. "That's not all." He fast-forwarded to when I circled the car, radioed dispatch, and there it was again. A flicker in the back seat, like someone shifting, moving, clear enough to see the silhouette of a hand pressing lightly against the window. But in real life, there had been no handprint, no fog on the glass, no trace at all. I backed away from the monitor, shaking my head. No, I would have seen that. I looked right inside. I would have seen that. The tech didn't answer. He just let the footage play, the hum of the speakers filling the room. And all I could hear was the car, the steady, endless engine noise. I left the station not long after, but the images followed me. Every shadow in my house seemed to shift if I looked too long. Every time I walked past a window, I felt eyes watching me from the dark outside. The next night, I sat in my cruiser long after my shift ended, parked in the lot, lights off, hands gripping the wheel. I told myself I wouldn't look at the dash cam again, but my hand moved on its own, powering up the screen, replaying the footage. Over and over, each time I noticed more, a tilt of the head, a faint outline of a smile, a reflection in the glass that didn't match the angle of my flashlight. The more I watched, the more certain I became that whatever I was seeing wasn't human. And then something happened that I can't explain. As I sat there, engine running, footage looping, the sound shifted. At first, it was faint, like background static. Then clearer, breathing. Not mine. Slow, steady breathing, as if someone sat in the back seat with me. I froze. My skin crawled. My hand hovered over the switch to kill the engine, to shut it all down. But I didn't move, because I could see it in the mirror. A shape. In the back seat. Not on the dash cam. Not on the monitor. In my cruiser. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring into the mirror, my breath shallow, my chest tight. The shape leaned forward slightly, almost curious, almost playful. A shadow that shouldn't exist, filling the back seat that I knew was empty. I blinked once, and it was gone. The silence that followed was worse than anything. I shut the dash cam off, killed the engine, stumbled out of the cruiser into the cold night air. My breath came fast, clouding in front of me, the parking lot empty, silent. But I knew it hadn't left. Since that night, I can't drive past that stretch of highway. The memory claws at me every time. The swerving car, the blood on the seat, the purse, the shadow leaning forward in the footage, and the feeling that hasn't left me since, that the driver never disappeared. They never left that car. They're still there, still in the back seat, watching, waiting, and sometimes, late at night, when my engine hums a little too steady, when the fog curls against my windows, I don't have to look in the mirror to know. They've found me again. It was just past midnight, and the highway stretched out in front of me like a ribbon of black glass. The only sound was the hum of my tires against the asphalt and the occasional distant wind brushing against the trees. I was the only car for miles, maybe even the only soul awake in this county, which made the next sight feel all the more unnatural. I noticed her almost immediately. A car, older than most I'd ever seen, crawling along at 10 miles under the speed limit. No lights flickering, just that steady, pale glow from the dashboard inside the vehicle. I remember the feeling, a prickling down my spine, the one that whispers that something isn't right even before your brain can put words to it. I flipped on my lights and pulled up behind her, heart thumping. I hadn't clocked a reason yet. There was no fog, no rain, no reason for someone to drive like this. And she didn't pull over right away, didn't react at all, really. She just kept going. I tapped the siren lightly, the soft weep echoing into the night. Finally, she eased onto the shoulder and I got out. The wind bit at my face. I remember wishing I'd grabbed my coat. Her car was a faded cream color, maybe from the 70s, with a layer of dust that suggested it hadn't seen the road in decades. The driver's side window slid down slowly. I froze for a second because it sounded almost deliberate, like the car itself was breathing. She was sitting there, hands on the wheel, pale as moonlight. Her skin seemed almost translucent under the streetlight, and her eyes. God, her eyes. They weren't exactly empty, but they weren't alive either. Just still. I could feel them looking through me like I wasn't a person at all. "License and registration," I said, my voice sounding louder than I expected in the empty night. She didn't move. She just lifted her hand slowly, and that was all the motion she made. I remember the small sound of the papers sliding across the vinyl dashboard like a whisper. I leaned in. Her hand trembled just slightly as she handed me a license that was older than most of the people I'd ever pulled over. The edges were frayed, the ink slightly smudged, and the date. I remember staring at it like my brain had frozen. I blinked. I double-checked. That couldn't be right. I'd stopped older drivers before, but this was decades past. I looked at her again, hoping my eyes were playing tricks. She hadn't changed. Pale, still, and unblinking. "Ma'am, your license," I said again, trying to keep the edge of nervousness out of my voice. Her lips parted slightly, a smile tugging at the corner. It wasn't friendly, though. It wasn't anything you'd recognize, just the kind of smile that feels like it belongs to someone who knows something you don't, something you'll never understand. I felt a chill brush against my neck. I stepped back, just enough to remind myself I was still in control, still wearing my uniform, still holding my flashlight. I told myself I wasn't imagining the smell, like old paper, like a library that had been closed for years, but with something metallic underneath. Blood, maybe. I ran her license through my system on the spot. Just a routine check, but the radio was silent. No response, no confirmation beep. Just that heavy, suffocating quiet that presses against your ears until it feels like you can't hear anything else. "Everything okay back there?" I asked into my radio. My voice sounded small. My stomach was twisting into knots. "Copy that," came a distant, static-filled voice. "License check?" I held up the card. It's expired, like decades." Affirmative. "Try the number again," the dispatcher said, voice clipped. I felt my hands trembling. I've seen bad things before. I've pulled over drunks, kids running from their parents, domestic disputes spilling into the street. But this was different. It wasn't alive. At least, not in the way we understand life. Her hands stayed folded over the steering wheel, pale and still, as if she had been sitting there waiting for me to come along for decades. My brain kept hitting the same loop. Decades expired, decades expired, decades expired. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight into the car. The beam caught her eyes again, and for a split second I swear I saw them move. Not blink, not look away. Move like they were tracking something behind me. I spun, heart hammering, but there was nothing. Just the empty black stretch of the highway, the trees swaying softly, the wind carrying a faint, unplaceable smell, like wet leaves and old paper. "Ma'am, do you know your license is extremely expired?" I asked, trying to keep calm. The words sounded weak even to me. She didn't respond. Not a word. Just that faint, subtle smile again, like she knew something I couldn't touch. I remember my fingers brushing the edge of the license as I held it in my hand. It was cold, freezing even, like it had been in a freezer for decades. "I almost dropped it. Step out of the vehicle," I said, trying to assert control. "I need to verify a few things." The car didn't move, and neither did she. I reached for my radio again. "Dispatch, I'm requesting backup. License extremely expired, subject. Not responsive." My voice cracked halfway through. I hate admitting that, but it's true. The silence stretched, the kind that makes you feel like you're underwater, like everything outside your own head doesn't exist. I kept shining my flashlight inside, trying to see anything that might explain her, anything normal. And then I saw it. There was a smell I couldn't place, like cold metal mixed with decay. I looked closer. The shadows inside her car, they seemed to shift. Not naturally, but unnaturally. Like the darkness was breathing. And her face, her pale face was closer now, pressing against the window, the smile widening just enough to make me step back. I stumbled, nearly hitting the car door. I forced myself to breathe, to think, to act like a cop, like a human being in control of a situation. "License and registration," I said again. My voice was steadier this time, but only just. Ma'am, I need you to cooperate. She lifted her hand once more, and this time the papers slid toward me faster, almost aggressively, like they wanted me to take them and leave. I grabbed them without thinking, crumpling them slightly in my hand. And that's when I realized I didn't feel her presence anymore. I mean, she was still in the car, obviously, but the weight of her stare, that oppressive knowingness had lifted slightly. I drove away eventually. I don't remember exactly how I convinced her to move, if she moved at all, or if I just drove past her in a blur of fear and adrenaline. All I remember is the license in my hand, freezing cold, and the pale glow of her face in the rearview mirror, lingering long after the car had disappeared from the road. At the station, I tried to run her name, a full check. Nothing came up. Not in the system, not in the files, not even a whisper of her existence. The only thing I had was that license fraying at the edges, decades expired, and colder than anything I had ever touched. I put it in the evidence locker, but I still think about her. About the way she smiled, about the way her hands trembled slightly. Or maybe that was my imagination. About the way the darkness inside her car didn't behave like darkness anywhere else I'd seen, and sometimes, when I'm driving these empty roads at night, I swear, I see her again. Just a pale shape, moving too slowly, almost drifting, waiting for someone to ask for their license. Because when she looks at you, it's not really your face she sees. It's your fear, your memories, the things you thought you'd left behind. And you can feel it, that quiet, pressing knowledge that she's been there the whole time, waiting, watching. I can't explain why I didn't just call it in and leave. Maybe part of me thought it was a prank, or a hallucination, or exhaustion. Maybe part of me wanted to see if it was real. But I know now, some things on this road aren't meant to be explained. And she wasn't driving fast. She wasn't running from anyone. She wasn't even moving at all, really. But the second you see her, you know. She's always been here. It was just past midnight, and the highway stretched out in front of me like a ribbon of black glass. The only sound was the hum of my tires against the asphalt and the occasional distant wind brushing against the trees. I was the only car for miles, maybe even the only soul awake in this county, which made the next sight feel all the more unnatural. I noticed her almost immediately. A car, older than most I'd ever seen, crawling along at 10 miles under the speed limit. No lights flickering, just that steady, pale glow from the dashboard inside the vehicle. I remember the feeling, a prickling down my spine, the one that whispers that something isn't right even before your brain can put words to it. I flipped on my lights and pulled up behind her, heart thumping. I hadn't clocked a reason yet. There was no fog, no rain, no reason for someone to drive like this. And she didn't pull over right away, didn't react at all, really. She just kept going. I tapped the siren lightly, the soft weep echoing into the night. Finally, she eased onto the shoulder and I got out. The wind bit at my face. I remember wishing I'd grabbed my coat. Her car was a faded cream color, maybe from the 70s, with a layer of dust that suggested it hadn't seen the road in decades. The driver's side window slid down slowly. I froze for a second because it sounded almost deliberate, like the car itself was breathing. She was sitting there, hands on the wheel, pale as moonlight. Her skin seemed almost translucent under the streetlight, and her eyes, God, her eyes. They weren't exactly empty, but they weren't alive either. Just still. I could feel them looking through me, like I wasn't a person at all. "License and registration," I said, my voice sounding louder than I expected in the empty night. She didn't move. She just lifted her hand slowly, and that was all the motion she made. I remember the small sound of the papers sliding across the vinyl dashboard, like a whisper. I leaned in. Her hand trembled just slightly as she handed me a license that was older than most of the people I'd ever pulled over. The edges were frayed, the ink slightly smudged, and the date. I remember staring at it like my brain had frozen. I blinked. I double-checked. That couldn't be right. I'd stopped older drivers before, but this was decades past. I looked at her again, hoping my eyes were playing tricks. She hadn't changed. Pale, still, and unblinking. "Ma'am, your license," I said again, trying to keep the edge of nervousness out of my voice. Her lips parted slightly, a smile tugging at the corner. It wasn't friendly, though. It wasn't anything you'd recognize, just the kind of smile that feels like it belongs to someone who knows something you don't, something you'll never understand. I felt a chill brush against my neck. I stepped back, just enough to remind myself I was still in control, still wearing my uniform, still holding my flashlight. I told myself I wasn't imagining the smell, like old paper, like a library that had been closed for years, but with something metallic underneath. Blood, maybe? I ran her license through my system on the spot. Just a routine check. But the radio was silent. No response, no confirmation beep. Just that heavy, suffocating quiet that presses against your ears until it feels like you can't hear anything else. Everything okay back there? I asked into my radio. My voice sounded small. My stomach was twisting into knots. Copy that, came a distant, static-filled voice. License check? I held up the card. It's expired, like decades. Affirmative. Try the number again, the dispatcher said, voice clipped. I felt my hands trembling. I've seen bad things before. I've pulled over drunks, kids running from their parents, domestic disputes spilling into the street. But this was different. It wasn't alive. At least not in the way we understand life. Her hands stayed folded over the steering wheel, pale and still, as if she had been sitting there waiting for me to come along for decades. My brain kept hitting the same loop. Decades expired, decades expired, decades expired. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight into the car. The beam caught her eyes again, and for a split second I swear I saw them move. Not blink, not look away. Move like they were tracking something behind me. I spun, heart hammering, but there was nothing. Just the empty black stretch of the highway, the trees swaying softly, the wind carrying a faint, unplaceable smell like wet leaves and old paper. Ma'am, do you know your license is extremely expired? I asked, trying to keep calm. The words sounded weak even to me. She didn't respond. Not a word. Just that faint, subtle smile again, like she knew something I couldn't touch. I remember my fingers brushing the edge of the license as I held it in my hand. It was cold, freezing even, like it had been in a freezer for decades. I almost dropped it. Step out of the vehicle, I said, trying to assert control. I need to verify a few things. The car didn't move, and neither did she. I reached for my radio again. Dispatch, I'm requesting backup. License, extremely expired, subject. Not responsive, my voice cracked halfway through. I hate admitting that, but it's true. The silence stretched, the kind that makes you feel like you're underwater, like everything outside your own head doesn't exist. I kept shining my flashlight inside, trying to see anything that might explain her, anything normal. And then I saw it. There was a smell I couldn't place, like cold metal mixed with decay. I looked closer. The shadows inside her car, they seemed to shift. Not naturally, but unnaturally. Like the darkness was breathing. And her face, her pale face was closer now, pressing against the window, the smile widening just enough to make me step back. I stumbled, nearly hitting the car door. I forced myself to breathe, to think, to act like a cop, like a human being in control of a situation. License and registration, I said again. My voice was steadier this time, but only just. Ma'am, I need you to cooperate. She lifted her hand once more, and this time the papers slid toward me faster, almost aggressively, like they wanted me to take them and leave. I grabbed them without thinking, crumpling them slightly in my hand. And that's when I realized I didn't feel her presence anymore. I mean, she was still in the car, obviously, but the weight of her stare, that oppressive knowingness, had lifted slightly. I drove away eventually. I don't remember exactly how I convinced her to move, if she moved at all, or if I just drove past her in a blur of fear and adrenaline. All I remember is the license in my hand freezing cold and the pale glow of her face in the rearview mirror lingering long after the car had disappeared from the road. At the station, I tried to run her name. A full check. Nothing came up. Not in the system, not in the files, not even a whisper of her existence. The only thing I had was that license, fraying at the edges, decades expired, and colder than anything I had ever touched. I put it in the evidence locker, but I still think about her. About the way she smiled, about the way her hands trembled slightly, or maybe that was my imagination. About the way the darkness inside her car didn't behave like darkness anywhere else I'd seen, and sometimes when I'm driving these empty roads at night, I swear I see her again. Just a pale shape, moving too slowly, almost drifting, waiting for someone to ask for their license. Because when she looks at you, it's not really your face she sees. It's your fear, your memories, the things you thought you'd left behind, and you can feel it. That quiet, pressing knowledge that she's been there the whole time, waiting, watching. I can't explain why I didn't just call it in and leave. Maybe part of me thought it was a prank, or a hallucination, or exhaustion. Maybe part of me wanted to see if it was real. But I know now, some things on this road aren't meant to be explained. And she wasn't driving fast. She wasn't running from anyone. She wasn't even moving at all, really. But the second you see her, she's always been here. I had barely slept after the night with the pale woman. The license still sat in my locker at the station, freezing cold even in the warm air of the office. I kept glancing at it, half expecting it to move, half expecting her to step out of the shadows. But nothing happened. Just the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant buzz of the radio. I ended up taking my cruiser out again around 2 a.m. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was guilt. The road felt empty, quieter than usual, and I tried to tell myself it was just my nerves, that the highway had always seemed darker at night. But it wasn't the same. I could feel it, the weight of something watching, something just out of reach. I pulled onto a stretch of road that cut through the woods. It was narrow, twisting, and the trees leaned over it like they were trying to block the sky. My headlights barely touched the pavement ahead. Then I noticed it. Movement. In the rearview mirror, at first I thought it was a trick of the shadows, branches catching the light. But then I saw it clearly. A figure sitting in the back seat, dark, shadowy, and smiling. I froze, hand tightening on the wheel. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. A passenger? That was impossible. I had been alone since leaving the station. The cruiser's back doors hadn't opened. No one had gotten in. And yet there it was. The smile. Wide, unnatural. Like it had been carved into the face. Not worn. It wasn't friendly. Not even human. But it was there, gleaming in the dim light, right behind me. I flicked on the interior light. Nothing. Just the empty back seat. My pulse jumped. I clicked the headlights, swerving slightly, trying to catch the reflection in the rearview mirror. Still nothing. Okay, I whispered to myself, shaking. It's just my eyes playing tricks. But the feeling didn't go away. That smile lingered in my mind, like a photograph burned behind my eyelids. I slowed down, scanning the road, the trees, the empty seats in my car. Every instinct screamed to stop, to get out, to run. But I stayed behind the wheel, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Then I saw it again. In the corner of the mirror, just for a heartbeat, a flicker, a shadow, and the smile. Always the smile. I pulled over, foot heavy on the brake, heart hammering in my chest. I swung the door open, flashlight ready for anything. The air hit me, cold, damp, the smell of wet leaves and something metallic. Nothing, just the empty road and the whispering wind. I got back in, shaking. The door shut with a click, the sound too sharp in the quiet night. I tried to convince myself I was seeing things, fatigue, stress, the memory of the pale woman twisting in my mind, feeding my nerves. I started driving again, slow, careful, eyes on the road, hands on the wheel. And then again in the mirror, the shadow, sitting there, smiling. I swear I could feel it, the weight of it pressing down on my shoulders. A presence that shouldn't exist, yet did. Something that wasn't just behind me, but inside the car, inside my head. I flicked the lights on and off, trying to make it appear, make it tangible. Nothing. The back seat was empty. Cold, empty, normal. I drove on. Tried to tell myself it was over, that if I kept my eyes forward, if I didn't look back, I'd be fine. But I could feel it. Every time I dared to glance, it was there, smiling, waiting, watching. I pulled into an abandoned gas station, the kind that hadn't seen business in years. Fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing above me. I sat there, hands shaking, trying to breathe normally. And then, I saw it in the reflection of the window. Behind me, not just in the mirror this time. Right behind me in the passenger seat, I spun around, heart in my throat. Nothing, just the cracked vinyl, empty and silent. I forced myself to calm down. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks. I had been awake too long. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had touched me, even if nothing did. A weight on my shoulder, a whisper at my ear. Something smiling, patient, eternal. I started the car again, trying to drive away. The road stretched before me, black and endless. And there it was, just in the mirror, flickering like a candle in a breeze. Smiling, waiting. I tried to ignore it. Looked straight ahead. But no matter how I tried, I felt the presence shift when I wasn't looking. Felt the cold brush of something I couldn't see. It wasn't just behind me. It was all around me. The car, the road, the night itself. I remember thinking I should pull over, call it in. But the radio was dead, silent, static hissing like it had been sucked dry of signal. No bars, no voices, just the endless whisper of darkness pressing in. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. One moment, that smile was there, carved into the shadows. The next, nothing. The back seat was empty, normal, human. I drove the rest of the night in silence, shaking, gripping the wheel until my knuckles hurt. Every so often, I caught a glimpse in the mirror, thinking I saw it, only to blink and find nothing. By the time dawn broke, I was at the station, my uniform soaked with sweat, my hands trembling. I didn't say a word to anyone. Tried to act normal. Tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Hallucinated it after the incident with the pale woman. But I knew. I knew what I had seen. I knew the smile hadn't been human. It had been something else. Patient, waiting, familiar. And I knew it hadn't left. Not really. Because every night since then, when I sit in the cruiser, when I drive the empty roads, I can feel it. Just behind me in the mirror, smiling. Always smiling. Waiting for me to look, to see it, to understand that some passengers never leave. And sometimes, late at night when I close my eyes, I swear I can feel that smile resting on the edge of my mind. Patient and calm, knowing I can never escape it. Never unsee it. I still check the back seat, always, even when I know it's empty. Because the moment I stop, the moment I let my guard down, I know it will return. And when it does, the smile will be waiting. I barely slept that morning. Not that I expected to. The cruiser sat idle in the lot, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying last night. The pale woman, her frozen smile, and the shadowy passenger grinning at me from nowhere. I kept staring at the license I'd pulled from her car. The edges were frayed, the ink smudged, and the dates, decades, expired. My fingers itched to know more, but part of me was terrified of the answer. At the station, I placed it under the fluorescent lights, staring at it. The card felt heavier than paper should and cold, so cold it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I ran my fingers over the letters and numbers again, and a shiver ran through me. It wasn't just cold, like ice from a freezer. It was the kind of cold that seemed to pull warmth from the air, from the room, from my body. I knew I had to check it. I had to. The dispatcher was still busy with routine calls, so I took it to the records room myself. The hum of the old fluorescent bulbs mixed with the faint creak of the linoleum under my boots, and it felt like the station had grown, quieter, waiting, watching. I typed in the name. Nothing. No hits. Not in the state system, not in the national database. I double-checked. Missed letters, typos? Nothing. Maybe she's from another state, I muttered, more to calm myself than anything else. I ran through cross-checks, federal checks, DMV archives, nothing. And then I did something I shouldn't have. I ran her birth date, and my stomach dropped. The records popped up. Date of death, 1975. I stared at the screen for a long time, shaking, trying to convince myself it was a mistake. Maybe the clerk had typed it wrong. Maybe the database had glitched. But the dates matched the license. Decades expired. Dead for decades. I looked at the card in my hand again. The paper was ice cold, almost frozen, and now I understood it wasn't just old. It hadn't been sitting in a drawer or a filing cabinet for decades. It was preserved in a way that no living thing should be. I backed away from the desk, heart hammering. I could feel the hair on my neck rising, the air pressing down on my shoulders. Something wasn't right. Something that shouldn't exist had handed me this license, had let me take it without a word, and had watched me as I drove away. I left the records room, trying to shake the cold and the creeping panic. But every time I glanced at the card, I felt it, like it carried her with it. Her presence, her stare, her pale hands. I wanted to throw it away. Burn it, destroy it, but I couldn't. My fingers itched to hold it again. I took it to the evidence locker, locked it away, tried to forget. Tried to convince myself I'd never see her again. But the night came, as it always does, and with it, the memory of her, the pale face, the tremor of her hand as she slid the card across the dashboard, the unnatural, patient smile. I tried to focus on work, on paperwork, calls, patrol routes, but the license haunted me. I kept imagining it sliding across the dash again, cold and deliberate, her fingers just brushing mine. Every sound outside the station made me jump. Footsteps, the creak of doors, the whine of the vending machine. By the afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see it again. Not the woman, God no, but the license. I took it out of the locker, cold, always cold. I ran my fingers over the paper, tracing the letters, the numbers, the dates, and that's when I noticed something else. A faint imprint, almost invisible, like a fingerprint pressed into the card. The skin seemed to ripple across the paper, subtle, impossible. I held it closer, squinting. I could swear I saw the faint outline of her hand pressed decades ago, still lingering in the fibers of the paper. I dropped the card, almost vomiting from the shock. The sound echoed across the empty station. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I backed away, telling myself it was my mind, my exhaustion, the paranoia. It had to be. It had to be. I tried to leave the station, thinking fresh air would help, but the hallway felt longer than usual, the shadows stretching oddly across the linoleum. And then, I heard it. A soft scrape, faint, almost casual, like something sliding across metal. I froze. The sound came again, from the locker where the license sat. I forced myself to look. The card hadn't moved, but for a heartbeat, I could swear I saw it twitch, like a pulse, like it was breathing. I left the station early that day, trying to shake the sensation, but in the cruiser, the license sat on the passenger seat. I hadn't placed it there. I couldn't have. And yet there it was, icy cold, as if inviting me to reach for it again. I drove slowly, glancing at it, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I kept my eyes on the road, but every shadow seemed to shift. Every flicker of the dashboard light made it feel like something moved behind me, just outside my vision. I remembered the smile of the passenger from last night, the pale woman's stare, and I felt it. Something was following me, something tied to the license, to the car, to the road itself. At home, I tried to research her. Obituaries, death records, newspaper archives, everything confirmed it. 1975. Dead. Decades dead. Yet her license was here. In my hand. Cold. Impossible. I sat with it on the kitchen table, flashlight on, examining every detail. The date of birth, the photo, the worn edges, the faint imprint of her hand. And then I noticed the ink. Not just old, but strange. It almost seemed to shimmer in the corner of my vision, like it wasn't fully there, like it shifted when I blinked. I recoiled, shaking, my mind reeling. I wanted to burn it, shred it, flush it. But part of me, terrified, morbidly curious, wanted to keep it. Wanted to know what would happen if I did. That night, I slept in the living room, the license on the counter under the lamp. I dreamt of her, pale hands sliding the card across the dash, eyes watching me, unblinking, patient, smiling. And I woke sweating, the cold from the paper seeping into my fingers even after hours of being out of my hand. I can't explain it. There's no rational explanation. Paper shouldn't feel cold for decades. Dead people shouldn't be able to give you something that touches you, follows you, changes the air around you. And yet, here it is, and I can't leave it alone. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but then I noticed the shadows in the corners of the room. The way the light bent strangely around the edges of the card. The whispers I almost heard when I leaned too close. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's a hallucination. But I know this, the license is cold, ice cold. And holding it feels like holding her hand. The dead hand of someone who shouldn't exist anymore. Pressed into paper, patient, waiting. And every time I touch it, I feel her. Not as a person, not as a ghost, but as something else. Something patient. Something eternal. Something that watches and waits. I don't know how I'll keep it. I don't know if I even want to, but I can't throw it away. I can't destroy it. Part of me knows that if I do, I'll be letting go of the only connection I have to what I saw on that highway decades ago and yet just yesterday. The paper is ice cold. It is impossible. It is her. And I don't know what she wants from me. I do know this. Every time I glance at it, I can feel her watching me. Smiling. Waiting. And I don't think I'm supposed to leave it alone. The nights after I found out she'd been dead since. 1975 felt different. Heavier, like the air itself had changed, pressing against my skin. The license never left my thoughts, no matter how far I tried to shove it into the back of my mind. And every time I touched it, every time I opened that evidence locker to check, it was still cold. Ice cold. I told myself I was done with it, that I'd keep it locked away and never look at it again. But I lied to myself. I kept checking. And the more I checked, the more I felt her presence. Sometimes, when I'd passed the locker room door, I thought I heard a faint scratching, like fingernails against metal. I tried to lose myself in routine. Paperwork, patrols, traffic stops. Pretend nothing had changed. But something had. I felt it in the silence of the cruiser, in the shadows that bent wrong in the corners of my eyes, in the mirrors that showed me things that shouldn't be there. The pale woman. The smile. Always there. It was around 3 in the morning when I sat alone at the desk, going through reports. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, my body heavy with exhaustion. The station was quiet, just the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights and the hum of the old vending machine. I needed something to distract me, anything. So, against my better judgment, I pulled up the dash cam footage from the night I stopped her. At first, everything looked normal. The empty road. My headlights cutting across the pavement. Her car slowing down, easing onto the shoulder. I leaned closer, heart pounding, watching myself walk up to her window. And there she was, the pale woman sitting perfectly still, her hands on the wheel, her face blank, unblinking. Seeing her again made my stomach twist. But then I noticed something. When I walked back to my cruiser, the dash cam kept rolling. The car didn't move. It sat there, parked on the side of the road, headlights dim. I waited for the moment I remembered. The moment she drove away, slow and quiet into the night. But it never happened. The car never left. It just sat there. I rewound the footage. Watched it again. Same thing. Me approaching, speaking, taking the license, walking back. Then nothing. Just her car, still and silent, unmoving. I checked the timestamp. Hours passed. 2, 3, 4. The car never moved. And yet, my report said otherwise. I remembered otherwise. I remembered watching her disappear into the darkness, her taillights glowing faintly until they were gone. But the camera told a different story. I felt a cold sweat drip down my neck. My stomach turned to stone. I checked again, faster this time, scrubbing through the hours of footage. The road stayed empty. Her car still parked in the same spot like it was waiting. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt tight, my hands clammy. I stopped the tape, closed the window, tried to convince myself it was a glitch, a technical error, but deep down I knew better. The car hadn't left, and maybe neither had she. I needed air. I grabbed my jacket, stepped outside into the cold night. The lot was quiet, empty except for the cruisers parked in neat rows, glinting under the weak yellow lamps. The air smelled faintly of rain, damp and metallic. And that's when I saw it. At the far end of the lot, tucked into the corner under the shadows of the trees, sat a cream-colored car. Faded. Dusty. Older than anything that should have still been running. My breath caught in my throat. It was her car. I froze, staring, my body locked in place. The license plate matched. The cracked vinyl interior, the dust, the faint glow of the dashboard light. It was her car. sitting in our lot like it had been there the whole time. I backed up a step, heart hammering so hard it hurt. My brain screamed at me to run, to call someone, to do anything except stand there. But my legs wouldn't move. I could see her inside. Not clearly, but enough. A pale shape behind the wheel. Still, waiting. My mouth went dry. My hands trembled. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, a reflection, my mind betraying me again, but I knew it wasn't. I knew she was there. I forced myself to blink, to look away, to convince myself it wasn't real. But when I looked back, the car was still there, unmoved, solid, as real as anything else in that lot. I stumbled back into the station, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands shook so badly I could barely work the lock. I pressed my back against the door, gasping for air. When I finally found the courage to check again, peeking through the blinds, the car was gone. The lot was empty. Just rows of cruisers under the lamps, silent and normal, but the memory stayed burned into me. The pale glow of the dashboard, the shadow of her behind the wheel. I went back to the dashcam footage later, hoping to prove to myself it was just fatigue, just paranoia. But the car was still there on the recording, hours passing, still, silent, waiting. The report said I released her, that I watched her drive away. That's what I remembered. But the camera showed otherwise. The lot showed otherwise, and the license, it was still in my evidence locker, cold as ever. I don't know what she is. A ghost, a memory, something older, something worse. All I know is she isn't gone. Not really. She's here, on the road, in the car, in the lot. And she's waiting, always waiting. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, driving slowly down the empty highways, waiting for someone else to pull her over. Or if she never left the lot at all, just sitting there in her car, pale hands on the wheel, patient eyes staring forward, knowing I'll see her again. And maybe that's the worst part. Not the cold license, not the smile in the mirror, not the car that shouldn't exist. The worst part is knowing she's not done with me. Not yet, because every time I close my eyes, I see her face in the glass. I see her smile in the mirror. I see her car parked in the lot, waiting. And deep down, I know. When she comes back, I won't be able to look away. I had been driving that stretch of road for years, the one they called Mile 13. People laughed at it, called it cursed or haunted, but I didn't believe in that crap. Not really. It was just a long, lonely highway, with the kind of night so dark it could swallow headlights whole. Still, there was something about it that never sat right with me. A feeling that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up the moment I crossed that marker. It was around 2 in the morning when my radio crackled to life. The station was quiet, static-laced, like a radio lost in a tunnel. I had been on patrol for 6 hours already. My coffee had gone cold and my eyes were heavy. But that stretch always kept me alert. Something about it didn't want me to sleep. I spotted the truck before I should have. The big rig was sitting on the shoulder, idling like it was waiting for someone or something. Its lights were dim, flickering in the mist that rolled off the road. I pulled up behind it, the patrol car's engine humming low, tires crunching the gravel. I clicked the mic, my voice steady, though my chest had that tightening, uneasy feeling. Evening. You know you're stopped on the shoulder, right? I leaned slightly forward, peering through the rain-streaked windshield. The driver's side was empty. At first, I thought maybe he had stepped out, maybe checking something under the hood, but the cab was silent. Just the hum of the idling engine. I walked around the front of my car, boots crunching against the wet asphalt. The mist curled around the tires, soft and almost alive. "Hello?" I called again, louder. My voice sounded too loud, too sharp, echoing against the trees that hugged the road. I was the only one there, I knew it. No houses, no streetlights, just the highway stretching endlessly, broken only by that dead mile marker. Then I saw him, sitting behind the wheel. His head tilted slightly, hands resting limply on the steering wheel. I swallowed hard. His eyes, they weren't looking at me. Or maybe they were, but through me. It was hard to tell. "Sir, everything all right?" My hand hovered over my holster, a reflex more than a precaution. No answer. Not a twitch, not a blink. Just that stillness, like he was waiting, or expecting me to leave. My stomach sank. I stepped closer and the smell hit me. Not the usual diesel or road grime, something else. Metallic, sweet, like blood left to sit in the sun. My boots sank slightly into the gravel as I circled the truck, trying to get a better look inside the cab. The cab door was unlocked. I know it was. I didn't open it, but the handle shivered under my fingers like a pulse, like it was breathing. I froze. My mind raced. This was a truck, not a house. It shouldn't do that, sir. You need help? I asked again, my voice tighter now. The fog seemed to thicken, curling around my ankles, muffling the distant sound of the highway. And then I heard it. A soft click. The door had swung open, slow, deliberate. Not the wind. I was certain of it. I swallowed. Stepped back. Tried to tell myself I'd imagine it if I just blinked hard enough. But then I noticed the logbook on the dash. Its pages were open. Fresh entries, neat handwriting. Dates, times. Notes that didn't make sense. They were written after... After what? I blinked, leaning closer, and the smell hit me again, stronger. I don't remember what I expected to see, but the air inside the cab was heavy, thick, like it had been sitting there for years. Dust hung in a low layer over the seats, yet the pages were crisp, like someone had just written them. My hand itched to reach out to touch them, but I didn't. I couldn't, not yet. Then the engine stuttered, coughing once, twice, as if it had just remembered it was alive. My heart jumped, and I stepped back sharply. The driver, he moved. Not his head. Not his hands. Just a twitch. A flicker of awareness that shouldn't exist. And I realized I'd been holding my breath. You need to leave, a voice whispered, low, almost swallowed by the hum of the idling truck. I froze. No one was there. The mist pressed against the patrol car's windows. The voice came again. Leave, I blinked. The driver's eyes locked onto mine now, fully. His face, pale, almost translucent in the dashboard light. But the expression wasn't human. Not really. A smile that didn't belong. A sadness too heavy for one man to carry. I took a step back, one foot dragging gravel with it. The hairs on my arms stood straight. The road behind me stretched endlessly, dark and empty. If I ran, I could make it to the next patrol, the next gas station, the next street light. But I didn't. My boots were glued to the gravel. My fingers itched for the radio to call it in, but my throat wouldn't work. I remember thinking, just for a second, that this truck wasn't real, that maybe I'd been patrolling too long, too late, that the road had finally gotten inside my head. But then the headlights flickered and the cab light glowed from within, throwing the driver's shadow long and thin across the fog. He didn't move, not really, but the shadow did. It stretched, curled, leaned closer like it wanted to touch me. I remember stepping back again, counting silently. 1, 2, 3. Telling myself I was still a cop, that I had backup a few miles down the road, that I was trained for this. But the calm in my chest was fake, a lie I told myself so I wouldn't bolt. The truck stayed idling. The engine's hum, a soft growl in the quiet night. I noticed the fog curling inside the cab now, a thin silver smoke that moved like smoke should not. And I knew somewhere deep that it wasn't smoke. Not really. I don't know how long I stared. Minutes, maybe hours. Time stretches differently on mile 13. I've heard the stories, drivers who vanish, travelers who never return, but I never believed them. Not until that night. Finally, I raised my hand, hesitant, trembling. Tried the radio. Dispatch, 1033. Need a unit at mile 13. Truck. Unknown situation. My voice was thin, barely a whisper, but it carried, barely. The click of the radio was louder than it should have been, and then it was gone. Just like that. The driver, the shadow, the fog inside the cab, gone. The truck still idled, but the air felt lighter. Too light, like a breath that wasn't mine. I stepped forward slowly, my boots wet with the gravel, peering inside. Empty. Nothing but the logbook, its pages fluttering softly in the breeze that had no origin. I flipped it open to the last entry. The handwriting. Mine. I don't remember writing it. I swear I don't. The words were simple. Leave. I backed away, heart hammering, finally reaching for the radio again. My fingers shook as I called it in. Dispatch. I'm leaving mile 13. Truck's empty. Repeat. Truck empty. The night swallowed the words. And when I looked again, the truck's lights had gone out. Just darkness. just the road stretching on, endless and empty. I left. I drove. I didn't stop until the sun was up, until the warmth of morning felt real. But I can still see it every time I close my eyes. That cab, that driver, the words written in my hand. Mile 13 isn't just a stretch of road. It's a place where the dead linger, where the past writes itself on the living. And that night, I became part of it. I've never gone back. And I never will. I couldn't shake it. Not the truck, not the road, not the feeling that something alive or something older had been waiting for me on mile 13. The night hadn't left my skin. Even under the fluorescent lights of the station, I could feel the chill crawling along my spine. My partner tried to joke, said I was imagining things after pulling a long shift. But he didn't see what I saw. He didn't smell what I smelled. Weeks later, I found myself back on that stretch. Not because I wanted to, but because the calls came in. Another truck idling on the shoulder, lights flickering, driver unresponsive. A different truck this time, but the same feeling. Same heavy silence. Same quiet that pressed against your ears so hard it hurts. I parked behind the rig and stepped out. The fog had returned, thick and crawling, curling around my boots, the gravel soaking my soles. I noticed the cab door, this one slightly ajar. No wind. I could hear it breathing. The hum of the engine was softer than before, more like a murmur, a whisper I couldn't understand. I crept closer, hand hovering over my holster, though I knew it was useless if the thing inside meant to harm me. The driver's seat was empty, and yet I felt eyes on me. I knew it. Hello? My voice sounded foreign to me, high, tense, vibrating against the still night. Nothing. Just the hum. I leaned closer to peer into the cab, trying to see a reflection in the glass. Nothing. Just the faint glow of the dashboard, the open logbook, pages fluttering without a breeze. And then I heard it. Leave. Leave. Not loud, not like someone shouting, but low, almost inside my skull. I jumped back, heart hammering. There was no one there. No one could have whispered from inside that empty cab. My mind reeled. My legs wanted to run. But my curiosity, stupid, cursed curiosity, kept me rooted. I edged closer again, the fog licking my ankles, the engine whispering under the hood. Go, go! The voice sounded different this time. Softer, urgent, pleading, but still impossible. The cab was empty. Hands on the steering wheel, the leather cracked and worn, but no one behind it. I leaned closer, tried to catch the words, tried to tell myself it was the wind. But it wasn't. My ears didn't lie. The whispers came in waves, soft and sibilant. Just enough for me to hear, Don't touch! Leave! I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight, dry. I wanted to run, wanted to leave mile 13 forever, but my boots stayed planted. Something inside me wanted to know. To understand, the logbook lay open, edges curled from damp. I reached for it, fingers trembling. The pages were covered in entries again, dates, times, notes that made no sense. Some of them were mine, some I didn't recognize the handwriting at all, spidery, erratic. One page had a single word written repeatedly, wait. I backed away suddenly. The cab's interior light flickered, shadows dancing along the ceiling. Then the whispers changed, closer now, circling, almost behind me, though the fog hid anything that might be there. Please. Leave. A cold breeze swept through the patrol car, rattling my radio, making the dashboard lights blink. I spun around. Nothing. Just fog, stretching endlessly, curling like smoke. My heart thumped so loud I thought it would crack my ribs. I told myself it was exhaustion. Years of night shifts, coffee, lack of sleep. I told myself my mind was playing tricks. But then I heard the laughter. Soft, hollow, a laugh that didn't belong to a man or woman, just a sound that rolled through the fog like water over stones. It didn't echo. It stayed where it was, close, intimate. And I felt it, eyes on me, unseen but present, pressing down like a hand across my chest. I stumbled backward, nearly hitting the patrol car. My fingers scrabbled at the door handle. I needed to get out, needed to leave. But even as I tried, I realized I wasn't moving fast enough. The whispers had grown louder, a low chorus now, urging, pleading, demanding. Leave, leave, leave. I looked back at the truck. The driver's seat was empty, yes, but I could see him there, or something like him. A shadow hunched, watching me. His face was featureless in the fog, but I knew it was him. The same driver from before, or at least the same presence. The logbook pages flipped violently as if caught in a storm that didn't exist. I froze. My fingers twitched, wanting to close it, to stop whatever was happening, but I couldn't move. I could only watch as words wrote themselves across the page, ink dark, almost bleeding through the paper. Don't look. Don't listen. Leave. I wanted to run then. I really did. But something stopped me. Something pulled me closer. A curiosity that scared me more than the fog, more than the whispering, more than the empty cab. And then it spoke. Not whispering this time. Clear, deliberate, right into my skull. You should not be here. But now that you are... See, I jerked back. The fog swirled inside the cab, twisting like smoke, forming shapes that my brain tried and failed to comprehend. Faces, hands, eyes staring from places they shouldn't exist. The cab became a small world of its own, dark and impossible. The whispering returned, a low, continuous hum now, blending into the growl of the engine. I realized with a sickening certainty that the voices weren't coming from outside the cab. They were coming from inside me, inside my head. Mile 13 had a way of reaching in, of burrowing under your skin, planting thoughts, doubts, fears that weren't yours. I stumbled backward again, heart hammering, sweat rolling down my temples. I could see my breath in the cold mist, but it didn't feel cold. It felt alive. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the whispering stopped. The fog thinned, the cab fell silent, empty once more. The truck's lights flickered once, then went dark. The logbook lay closed, neat and undisturbed. I glanced at the road, but it was just asphalt stretching into nothing. Quiet. Still. Dead. I took a step back, then another. My legs shook uncontrollably. The patrol car door never felt so far away. I opened it and climbed in, fumbling with the radio. Dispatch. 10:33. Truck unknown situation. Nothing visible. Requesting backup. My voice cracked. And then I drove. The whole way, the whispers lingered at the edge of my hearing. Soft, impossible, almost comforting in a way that made my stomach churn. Mile 13 was alive tonight, more than it had ever been. And I had been inside its shadow. I had felt it, smelled it, heard it. When I finally reached the next town, the sun was rising. Pale orange light slicing through the mist, burning the fog into nothing. I parked the car outside the diner, knees weak, heart still hammering. I tried to tell myself it was over. That the truck, the whispers, the fog, they were gone. But I knew they weren't. They were never gone. Mile 13 leaves a mark, a scar you can't see but can feel. I could feel it in my bones, in my pulse, in the way my hands shook even hours later. And deep down, I knew it was only waiting for me to return, because it always waits. I kept telling myself I wouldn't go back. I swore it. After the whispers, after the logbook, after that suffocating fog, I told myself I was finished with Mile 13. But some roads don't let you leave. Some roads circle back, pulling you in whether you want it or not. A month passed. I started sleeping again, but only in bursts. I kept hearing voices in the quiet, just under the hum of the fridge, just behind the static of the TV. Sometimes I thought it was my name, other times just a soft leave stretched out like a warning. My partner joked that I needed a vacation, but he never drove past Mile 13 at night. I did. I had no choice. That night, the call came through at 1:47 a.m. Unattended vehicle, possible hazard, Mile 13. My stomach dropped. My radio cracked in and out with static, and for a moment I considered ignoring it, pretending I hadn't heard. But I knew better. The road wasn't done with me. It wanted me back. When I got there, I knew it was the same truck. Same rig, same faded paint, same shadow in the mist. It sat exactly where I'd seen it before, like it hadn't moved an inch since the first time. Its headlights were off, but the cab light glowed faint and yellow, flickering. I stepped out of my cruiser. My boots hit gravel. The sound seemed swallowed by the night. No wind, no insects, just the steady hum of the idling engine. I approached slowly, my breath frosting in the air. The passenger door swung open with a groan before I even touched it. My heart stopped. The driver's side was closed, locked from within, but the passenger door hung wide like it was inviting me in. I called out, voice shaking despite myself. "State Trooper! Is anybody in there?" Nothing. Just that heavy silence. I moved closer. The smell hit me again, sickly sweet, like old blood soaked into leather. My stomach tightened. The cab was empty. At least that's what my eyes said. But every nerve in my body screamed someone was sitting just out of sight. I circled the truck, shining my flashlight across the chrome, across the tires slick with condensation. That's when I noticed it. The logbook on the dash again, open, pages fluttering though the air was perfectly still. I climbed the side steps, leaning in through the open passenger door. The seat was worn, cracked, foam showing through the seams, empty. But the logbook drew me in. My hand shook as I reached for it. The handwriting was different this time, more frantic. Scrawls written so hard they nearly tore through the paper. The entries stretched on for pages, names, dates, mile markers. And at the bottom of the page, fresh ink glistened, still wet. "Don't let it open again." I froze. The words weren't even dry, and yet no one was here. My flashlight beam shook against the dashboard, then I heard it. The click of the passenger door moving on its own. Slowly, deliberately. It creaked wider as if the truck was breathing, exhaling. I jumped back, nearly falling off the step. The fog had thickened, coiling inside the cab like smoke. It moved strangely, curling around the seats, seeping from the vents. I heard voices again, whispers overlapping, impossible to separate. They weren't words I could make sense of, just tones, soft and desperate. And then, clear as day, "Close it!" My hand shot out, grabbing the door handle, slamming it shut. The cab light flickered violently, then went dark. The whispers cut off instantly, leaving only the hum of the engine. I staggered back, breathing hard, sweat chilling on my skin. But before I could catch my breath, the door clicked again. Slowly, impossibly, it opened by itself. The hinges groaned like they hadn't been used in years. My flashlight beam swung wildly. Nothing, just the empty seat. The logbook, the fog rolling in thicker. The logbook pages turned on their own, slapping against the dash, stopping on a fresh page. New words appeared in jagged strokes. "You didn't close it fast enough." I stumbled back, heart hammering. My breath came in shallow bursts. I wanted to run to my cruiser, get back on the road, never return. But I couldn't. I was caught between terror and fascination. Something in me wanted to understand. The passenger door slammed shut on its own, loud enough to echo down the dead road. I flinched. For a moment there was silence, and then soft, metallic clicks. The sound of the lock turning by itself. I thought maybe it was over. That whatever game the road was playing with me had ended. But then the driver's door opened. I froze. My light trembled in my hand. The seat was still empty, but not the mirror. In the side mirror, I saw him. The driver. His pale face staring back at me, eyes dark, hollow, lips barely moving. He whispered something I couldn't hear. I whipped my head around, but the seat was empty. Only in the mirror was he there. The logbook pages flipped again, landing on the last entry. My throat tightened as I read it. My name, written in that same frantic scrawl, over and over, filling the page. My knees buckled, and I stumbled back into the fog. My radio hissed with static at my side, no words, just white noise. My partner's voice cut through, faintly, distorted. "You there? Mile 13, hello?" I grabbed the mic, voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm here at mile 13. Truck's here. It's the same damn truck? I need backup now." The radio crackled, but his voice didn't return. Just static. And beneath it, barely audible, a whisper. Too late. I dropped the mic like it burned me. My eyes darted back to the truck. Both doors were wide open now, the cab light glowing unnaturally bright, casting shadows that stretched far too long across the ground. The fog inside the cab writhed, shapes forming, twisting, stretching into something almost human. Figures pressed against the glass from the inside, hands leaving no prints, faces leaving no fog. The voices rose, overlapping, louder, desperate. "Leave, leave, leave!" And then all at once, silence. The light snapped off. The door slammed shut. The engine cut out. The truck sat dead and dark. I stood there shaking, heart pounding in my ears, breath sharp and ragged. My knees wanted to give. Every part of me screamed to run, to get back in my cruiser, to drive until the dawn burned this place out of my memory. But I couldn't move. Because when I looked down, I realized the logbook was no longer in the cab. It was in my hands. The last page was still open. My name filled it. The ink still wet, the strokes jagged and trembling. But at the bottom, beneath all the repetitions, one line stood out, written darker than the rest. "He's not dead." The breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled so violently the book nearly slipped from my grip. I glanced back at the truck. Its windows were black, reflecting nothing. And then I heard the door click again. The passenger door. Just a soft shift of the latch. Just enough to tell me that the road wasn't finished with me yet. I dropped the logbook and ran. I didn't stop until the glow of my cruiser's lights broke through the fog. I slammed the door shut behind me, locked it, started the engine with shaking hands. I drove hard. I didn't look back. But even as I sped down the empty highway, my mirrors showed the truck sitting there, doors open, cab light flickering, waiting, and deep inside I knew I hadn't escaped, because the passenger door would always open again, and one day it would be waiting for me to sit inside. After that night with the passenger door, I told myself again that I was done. I'd seen enough, felt enough, carried enough whispers and shadows in my head to last me a lifetime. I wasn't going back to mile 13, not for anyone, but the road doesn't care about what you want. It has its own rules. I started noticing them first in the corner of my eyes. Figures, thin, tall, walking along the roadside. Not just on patrols near mile 13, but even when I was driving home. Shapes barely visible in the reflection of my side mirror. Every time I looked straight at them, they'd vanish, leaving me staring at the empty shoulder. At first I thought I was tired, seeing things, stress. But then the calls started piling up again. Accidents, stranded vehicles, reports of people wandering along the shoulder at night. Always at mile 13, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't hand it off. So one night I went back. The road was empty, but it never really feels empty there. The air was too heavy, too still. The mist hanging low as always, glowing faint under my headlights. My cruiser's tires hummed against the asphalt. At mile 13, I slowed down. My spotlight cut through the fog, sweeping across the shoulder. That's when I saw them, figures, at least half a dozen, walking slowly along the gravel, heads bowed, movements sluggish. Men, women, it was hard to tell. Their clothes were tattered, stained. Some dragged their feet like they didn't have the strength to keep going. Others turned their heads slightly, just enough for me to catch the pale blur of their faces. I stopped breathing. My hand tightened on the wheel. The beam of my spotlight caught them clearly, frozen for an instant like deer in headlights. And then, nothing. The light passed over and they were gone. The shoulder was empty. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, shook my head. I knew what I saw. I wasn't dreaming. They were there. I pulled over, killed the engine, stepped out onto the gravel. My boots crunched loudly in the silence. The fog thickened, curling higher, wrapping around my knees. I swept my flashlight across the roadside. Empty. Hello? My voice was small, weak, swallowed by the dark. No answer. Just the echo of my own words bouncing back off the trees. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was just shadows, my brain filling in blanks. But then I heard it, soft footsteps behind me, shuffling on gravel. I spun around. No one. Just fog. Just road, but I knew. The sound had been real. Slow, dragging steps, coming closer until I turned. The fog moved strangely then, like shapes forming inside it, almost solid. I lifted my flashlight and the beam caught something pale, an arm. Thin, sickly, half-formed. It pulled back into the mist before I could see more. The whispers started again, faint, brushing against my ears. Here, here, here. I froze. My chest tightened. My pulse hammered in my throat. The fog shifted again, and I saw them. The same figures from the spotlight, walking silently along the shoulder, their faces down, their feet dragging. One of them, a woman in a torn dress, lifted her head just enough for me to see her eyes. Black, hollow, empty. I staggered back, nearly tripping over my own boots. My flashlight shook violently in my hands. They didn't look at me. Not fully. Just kept walking, slow and steady, like the road stretched endlessly ahead of them. I forced myself to speak. "Do you need help?" The words sounded ridiculous in my ears. No answer. Not in words. But the whispers grew louder, overlapping now, almost frantic. "Go! Go! Go!" And then they vanished. Just like that. One blink and the shoulder was empty again. I stood there trembling, heart pounding, trying to breathe. My breath hung in the cold air, fog mixing with fog. My flashlight beam cut only emptiness now. I backed slowly toward my cruiser, one shaky step at a time. I reached the door handle, gripping it so hard my knuckles ached. I told myself I was leaving, that I'd had enough, that this time I wasn't going to stay. But then I heard movement again. Not footsteps. Not whispers. Breathing. Right behind me. My blood turned to ice. Every hair on my body stood on end. I didn't want to turn. I knew I shouldn't. But I did. The spotlight still cut across the shoulder, beam slicing the fog. And in that beam, just yards away, a figure stood still, facing me. A man, or something that looked like one. His clothes were soaked, dripping. His skin hung loose, sagging, pale as milk. His head tilted unnaturally, one side caved in as if crushed. His eyes, empty, black sockets. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My flashlight slipped from my hands, hitting the gravel with a dull thud. The figure didn't move closer. It just stood there, dripping, staring, or at least I thought it was staring. Then slowly it raised its arm, pointed down the road. Mile 13, I shook my head. "No!" My voice cracked. The figure's jaw moved. Not words, not sound, just an awful grinding, like wet bone scraping. My skin crawled. I stumbled back into the cruiser, fumbling for the door handle, yanking it open, slamming it shut behind me. I started the engine, tires squealing against the wet asphalt. The headlights cut through the fog. For a second, I thought I saw more of them, dozens this time, walking along both sides of the road, pale faces glowing in the beams. But as I sped forward, they faded into nothing. I drove fast, too fast, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My hands shook against the wheel. Every mile felt endless. The road stretching forever, no towns, no signs, just blackness. When I finally saw the glow of another patrol car ahead, parked on the shoulder miles past mile 13, I nearly broke down. I pulled over, stepped out, knees weak. My partner was there sipping coffee, calm as if the night was just another night. "You all right?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My throat was raw, dry. He looked past me, back down the road toward mile 13. "See something?" I swallowed hard. "Figures. People walking. But when I got close, they vanished." He frowned, shrugged. "Fog plays tricks." I wanted to argue, to scream, to grab him by the shoulders and tell him what I saw wasn't fog, wasn't tricks, wasn't imagination. But the words caught in my chest, because part of me knew he wouldn't believe me, and part of me was terrified he would. That night, when I finally got home, I sat in the dark with all the lights off, staring at the glow of the clock on the wall. My hands still shook. My breath still came too shallow. I could still see them, lined along the shoulder, walking nowhere. And I knew what the dripping man had meant when he pointed. Mile 13 isn't just a stretch of cursed asphalt. It's a path, a place where the dead still walk, unable to stop, unable to rest. And now, they'd seen me too. I don't think they'll ever stop. Not until I join them. I tried to put it behind me. I really did. After seeing those figures on the shoulder, after hearing them breathe, after watching that broken man point down the road, I swore I'd never go back. I avoided that stretch whenever I could. Took the long way around, drove extra miles just to keep from crossing mile 13. Still, it followed me. Not in the road this time, but in the quiet moments. In mirrors. In dreams. At night, I'd wake to the sound of doors creaking open. I'd run to the porch, gun in hand, but nothing was there. Just the night. Just silence. And always, Always the lingering smell of diesel in the air, faint but sharp. I started dreaming of the truck. It would sit outside my house idling, cab light glowing faint yellow through the curtains. Sometimes I'd see shapes moving in the fog behind it. Sometimes the passenger door would open, slow and deliberate, waiting for me to step inside. I told myself it was just my mind, that it wasn't real. But then, weeks later, I heard the radio call. Unit 4, respond to mile 13. Unattended truck on the shoulder. Possible driver down. My stomach dropped. My palms went slick. I didn't want to answer. I prayed someone else would take it. But dispatch repeated the call, sharper this time. And I knew the road wasn't finished. I drove. The fog was thicker than usual that night, rolling heavy over the asphalt, swallowing my headlights. My cruiser's engine hummed low, but every sound felt muted, like I was driving underwater. And then I saw it. The truck. Same spot, same posture, like it had never left. The headlights were dead, but the cab light glowed faint and sickly, yellow against the mist. I slowed, heart thumping so hard I felt it in my ears. I could already smell it. That sweet metallic stench that clung to the leather, to the air, to my skin. But this time I wasn't the first. Another patrol car was already there, parked behind the truck. A young deputy leaned against it, writing something on his clipboard, casual, like this was just another roadside check. I pulled up behind him, stepped out, boots crunching gravel. He looked up, startled. Didn't think anyone else was coming. Dispatch said it was just a vehicle hazard. I forced a nod, though my throat was dry. Truck again? Yeah, weird one. Driver inside, unresponsive. Smells bad, too, like something died in there. He wrinkled his nose. Figured maybe he's drunk, passed out. Gonna check him in a second. My skin crawled. I wanted to grab him, shake him, tell him not to open that door, not to look inside. But the words stuck. He walked past me, casual, confident. He climbed the steps of the cab and tugged the door open. It groaned, hinges screaming. The smell hit us both, stronger than anything I'd ever smelled before. Rot. Wet decay. Christ. The deputy gagged, covering his mouth with his sleeve. And then he froze. His flashlight beam caught the driver. It was him. The same man. Same pale skin. Same hollow eyes. But now, he was dead. Long dead. Skin shriveled, yellowed, stretched thin over bone. His clothes hung loose, soaked in stains that had dried into the fabric. His hands were still on the wheel, stiff, fingers curled. But the engine was still running, and the logbook was still open. The deputy whispered, "What the hell?" and stepped closer. I grabbed his arm hard. "Don't." He looked at me, confused, annoyed. "What? He's gone, man. I just need to..." "No." My voice cracked. "You don't understand. He's not gone." Before he could argue, the passenger door creaked open on its own. Slowly. The deputy stepped back, eyes wide. "Did you?" I shook my head. My chest was tight. My breath came fast and shallow. We both stared as the logbook pages turned. Slowly, deliberately, stopping on a fresh sheet. New words appeared, dark, wet, seeping into the page as if written right then. "Repeat." The deputy cursed under his breath. "What the hell is this?" I grabbed his shoulder. "We need to leave, now." But before he could move, the driver's head shifted. Not much. Just enough to make my stomach lurch. His jaw opened with a slow crack, and a sound slipped out. A whisper. "Leave." The deputy staggered back, dropping his flashlight. He's alive!" I shook my head violently. "No, he's not. He never was." The shadows inside the cab shifted then, stretching unnaturally, long arms reaching toward the open door. Figures pressed against the windows, faces twisted, eyes hollow. The whispers rose, louder, layered, overlapping. "Leave. Leave. Leave!" The deputy panicked, stumbling back toward his cruiser. "I'm calling this in." He grabbed his radio, but all that came through was static. I knew what he was hearing. The same whispers I'd heard. The road doesn't let you call for help. I turned back toward the truck. The driver's hollow eyes stared at me now, fixed, unblinking. His lips moved slowly, painfully. I leaned closer against every instinct screaming at me to run. His voice was like dry leaves dragging across asphalt. "Not done." The engine roared suddenly, louder than before, rattling the ground. The passenger door slammed shut with a deafening crack. The cab light flared so bright it burned into my eyes, and then silence. When my vision cleared, the cab was empty. The driver's seat empty. The logbook lay shut on the dash. The smell was gone. The engine still hummed, but the cab was clean, ordinary, almost normal. The deputy stood frozen, pale, shaking. What the hell did we just see? I couldn't answer. My throat was tight. My hands trembled. Because I realized something that made my stomach turn. This wasn't the first time. The logbook said it. Repeat, this truck wasn't stuck in time. It wasn't trapped. It was playing the same scene again and again, dragging in whoever stopped to notice. The deputy didn't believe me when I tried to explain. He thought maybe the fumes, the fog, stress, it had gotten to us both. He filed his report, marked the driver as deceased on scene. They towed the truck away, but I know better. 2 weeks later, I heard the call again. Another deputy, same truck, same spot, same driver sitting behind the wheel, long decomposed, and I know it won't stop. Not until it's me. Not until it's my hands on that wheel, my name filling that logbook. Because that's the rule of mile 13. It doesn't haunt you once, it repeats, over and over, until the day you finally join them on the shoulder. And when that day comes, the passenger door will be waiting. It was close to midnight when I first saw it. A white sedan gliding along the highway like it had no weight, its right tail light flickering like a dying candle. At first I thought maybe it was a trick of my tired eyes, the kind of thing you see after staring too long at the dark road. But the flicker kept happening, stuttering in rhythm with the car's movement, and I realized it was real. I slowed my bike and watched it from a distance. The highway was mostly empty tonight. Just the occasional rumble of a truck far behind me, and the white sedan seemed almost deliberate. Like it was waiting. My stomach nodded, a warning I couldn't quite name. It passed me and then, almost absurdly, slowed down. The car drifted to the shoulder, as if it had noticed me staring, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I hesitated. I wanted to keep riding, keep my distance, but curiosity, stupid curiosity, got the better of me. I stopped my bike and watched it slide further down the road. The sedan's windows were dark, too dark. I couldn't see the driver. Couldn't see anything inside. Just the vague shape of the car itself, its license plate obscured by shadow. My fingers tightened around my backpack strap, the rubber of my gloves cracking under the pressure. Then the car stopped completely, right at the bend where the road narrowed. The flickering taillight winked out, leaving the rear almost entirely black. I could hear my own heart, a dry, thumping echo in the quiet night. I should have just kept going. I really should have. But something about the car called to me, a wordless insistence. The driver's side window rolled down slowly, the mechanical whine scraping through the night like fingernails on metal. "Need a ride?" a voice said, smooth, neutral. I froze. It wasn't a shout, wasn't even loud enough to startle me. It just existed, floating in the air between us. I couldn't see the face behind it, not really, just a shadow that moved slightly when it spoke. No, I'm okay," I mumbled, feeling my voice wobble. My hands were shaking, the little tremors running down my arms that I tried to hide in the dim glow of the streetlights. The driver didn't answer. The engine idled quietly, like it hadn't expected a response at all. And then, almost casually, the voice said again, "I can give you a lift." Just for a while, I swallowed. Something about the calm certainty in that voice made me step back, made me feel like the road had narrowed to just the two of us, the world around swallowed by darkness. But at the same time, I wanted to see. I wanted to know. And so I nodded stupidly and said, "Okay." The window rolled up. The car stayed there, waiting. I climbed in the back seat, the leather cold under my hands. The driver didn't introduce himself, didn't look at me. He just started driving, and the night slid past the windshield like dark liquid. I wanted to ask questions, but the air in the car was strange, thick. Not smog or smoke, just heavy, like it had weight. Every word felt like it would break it, make something shift. So I stayed quiet, staring out at the dark edges of the road. The highway seemed endless. The lines on the pavement blurred under the headlights. Occasionally, we passed another car, but it was like they didn't exist, passing specters moving without notice. I tried to trace the driver's face in the shadows, but there was nothing. Just the vague suggestion of eyes, of a mouth that might smile. "Where are you headed?" I asked eventually, my voice smaller than I wanted. "Somewhere you need to be," he said. Nothing more. No explanation. Just the sound of the tires on the asphalt. The strange thing was how normal everything looked. The road, the trees, the faint glow of distant signs. Everything looked like any other night, any other ride. And yet I felt wrong. My gut twisted, and a slow, creeping unease crawled along my spine. I noticed the flicker again. The taillight, I realized, was the one behind us now. Another car following, but far enough back that it didn't seem threatening. Or maybe it was part of the illusion, part of the subtle pattern my mind was trying to find. I asked about it. "Is that car behind us?" "Not our concern," he said. The calm certainty in his voice was terrifying. Not loud, not menacing, but something in it made the thought of arguing pointless. I stopped trying. My eyes focused on the road ahead, on the faint glow of distant streetlights that barely illuminated the asphalt. Time became slippery. Minutes stretched, then shrank. The road twisted in ways I didn't remember from before, and small things started to unsettle me, like a shadow that moved just a bit too slowly, or the way the dashboard reflected the faint flicker of the world outside in strange, fractured shapes. I wanted to ask where we were going. I wanted to demand to be let out. But every time I opened my mouth, the words felt wrong. Hollow, like they would vanish before they reached the driver. I tried to focus on anything else, my backpack, the sound of the tires, the flicker of my watch in the dim light. But the car itself seemed alive, not moving on its own exactly, but aware, breathing in time with me. My heart thumped in sync, my mind screaming in tiny, desperate pulses. Somewhere along the way, I realized I hadn't seen the driver's hands on the wheel. Not really. There was a blur of movement, a faint reflection of something metallic, but mostly it was just darkness. And when I looked at the side mirrors, the reflection of the back seat was off. The edges warped, like I was seeing it through water, like reality itself had shifted just enough to make me doubt it. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it. Part of me wanted to believe that, to tell myself exhaustion and nerves were making my eyes play tricks. But another part, the part that had stayed alive and alert all my life, knew better. Then I saw him, just for a second. Not the driver, not fully. Something sitting in the passenger seat, or maybe the back. I couldn't tell. A figure hunched, pale, shadowed. It didn't move like a person. Not exactly. But I swore I saw the glint of eyes, too dark to be human, staring straight at me. I blinked. Just for a second. And it was gone. The seat was empty. Nothing there but the worn leather and the faint imprint of a jacket. I choked back a laugh that wasn't really laughter, more a sob disguised as amusement. I tried to convince myself I was seeing things. Maybe the reflection of the streetlights. Maybe a trick of my own mind. But the unease didn't go away. If anything, it sank deeper, like a cold finger curling around my spine. We drove on. I didn't speak. The road never ended, the shadows never lightened. And the taillight of the car behind us, no, not behind us, sometimes to the side, sometimes just a flicker in the distance, always present, kept me on edge. Hours passed, I think. Or maybe minutes. Time lost its meaning. The car became a capsule of quiet terror, a space where the world outside didn't exist. My fingers ached from gripping the seat. My throat was dry, my eyes raw from staring. Finally, he spoke again. "We'll be there soon. I didn't ask where." I didn't want to know. I only nodded, trying to focus on breathing, trying to convince myself I wasn't alone, even though every instinct screamed that I was. And then, without warning, he slowed. The car drifted to the shoulder. The engine idled again, quiet. The world outside was still dark. I could see the faint shimmer of the highway stretching into the black distance. "Get out," he said. My hands were shaking too much to move. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. What is this place?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just waited. And when I finally opened the door, the cold night hit me like a physical blow. The road was empty. No lights, no signs of civilization, nothing but the faint flicker of my own racing thoughts. I turned back, half expecting to see the car vanish or the figure still inside, waiting. But the sedan was there, solid, real, taillight flickering weakly. The driver, no face, no presence, just the faint outline of the seat, was gone. I ran. Didn't look back. My heart pounding, the night pressing in from every side. But in the distance, I could still see the flicker, the white sedan gliding along the road, moving like it had no weight, like it had been waiting for me all along. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if the driver was real, or if the car even existed outside my mind. But I remember the flicker, and I remember the weight of the quiet, the almost human certainty in that voice, the way the night itself seemed to bend around the sedan, and somewhere deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. When the police lights flared behind us, I felt a kind of relief. Maybe it was strange, but in that moment I thought a flashing red and blue would pull me out of whatever nightmare I'd stepped into. The white sedan slowed, drifted again toward the shoulder. Gravel crackled under the tires. The driver didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me. He just pulled over, calm as before, and waited. My throat was dry as I glanced through the rear window. The patrol car stopped behind us, its headlights slicing through the night. The flickering taillight of the sedan seemed even weaker now, blinking like it was on its last breath. The officer stepped out slowly, one hand resting on his belt. He approached on the driver's side, tapping on the glass with two knuckles. "License and registration, please." The driver rolled the window down. He still didn't look at me, didn't move strangely, just handed over a folded wallet like this was the most ordinary thing in the world. His voice was calm, low, the same tone he'd used with me. "Of course, officer. Just heading home." I sat frozen in the back, unsure if I should say something. My mind kept racing with the memory of that shadow, that passenger-shaped thing I thought I'd seen earlier. I wanted to shout, to warn the officer, but fear knotted my chest. The officer leaned down, shining his flashlight into the front. "Got a flickering taillight here. Been on the road long?" "A while," the driver said. "Picked up a hitchhiker a few miles back. Just doing him a favor." The officer glanced at me, and for the first time I felt like I was anchored to reality again. His beam caught my face, and I squinted. "You okay back there, kid?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice thin, almost breaking. I wanted to explain more, but the driver turned his head slightly toward me. Just a tilt, just enough to quiet me, and against my own will I shut my mouth. The officer didn't seem convinced. He lingered a moment longer, scanning the inside of the car. His flashlight swept the front seat, then the back, then the side mirror. I saw his brow furrow. His beam came back toward me again, as if something didn't line up. "Sit tight," he said, stepping back toward his cruiser with the license in hand. The silence that followed was unbearable. The driver didn't move, didn't speak. His hands rested loosely on the wheel as if they weren't even holding it. Finally, I whispered, "Why did you say I was a hitchhiker?" The driver didn't answer at first. Then quietly, almost like he was talking to himself, he said, "Because you were." A chill ran through me so fast I nearly shivered. My mouth opened, but the officer was already back, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. He leaned in again. "Sir, step out of the vehicle for me." The driver obeyed. No protest, no question. He opened the door and got out, the dome light flickering weakly before dying again. I felt safer with him outside, but that relief was short-lived. The officer's eyes moved past him to the inside of the car, to me. "Where's the other one?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. The other one?" "The hitchhiker," he said firmly. "You said you picked up a hitchhiker." The driver smiled faintly, hands relaxed at his sides. "Yes, officer. He's right there." He motioned toward the back seat, toward me. The officer's flashlight burned into the car again, sweeping the empty space next to me. His face stiffened. He stepped back slightly. "No one's back there," he muttered. My stomach dropped. I felt a hole open in me, a gaping cold. I turned, desperate to prove I was there, that I was real. My hands pressed against the seat, against the glass, the leather, anything solid. But the officer's eyes didn't meet mine. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me, I swear, the driver said calmly. I just picked him up. He was sitting right there. The officer's hand went to his radio. His voice was tight. Dispatch, I've got a code 1076. Possible. He stopped himself. Then he turned back, eyes sharp. You stay here. Don't move. He led the driver a few steps away, murmuring low, too far for me to catch. I pressed my face against the window, desperate for any sign he knew I was here. But the truth began to sink in, like a weight pulling me under. He couldn't see me. He couldn't hear me. I pounded on the glass. I shouted. I tried to scream my name, but the sound felt swallowed, thin, like it didn't carry past my own lips. The officer turned back once, scanning the car again. His eyes narrowed at the empty back seat. You're telling me someone was there? Yes, the driver said. His tone was steady, almost casual. He was right there. The officer shook his head. There's no one in this car but you. The words sank like stones in my chest. My fists hit the seat again and again. Nothing. No reaction. Not even a flicker. The officer sighed, rubbed his temple, then turned toward his cruiser. Stay here, he muttered. I'm running this plate. The driver didn't argue. He stood still, calm, as if waiting for something inevitable. I pressed myself against the window, trying to catch the officer's eye one last time, but he never looked my way. He walked back to his car, radio crackling faintly as the door shut behind him, and then, for the first time, the driver turned to look at me. Really look. His face was pale in the glow of the headlights, his eyes dark and endless. A thin smile crept across his lips. You see? He whispered. I shook my head, desperate, panicked. What's happening? You're the passenger, he said simply. And passengers always vanish. The words hit me harder than the cold, harder than the silence. Because as he said them, I felt something shift. My hands blurred at the edges, just slightly like smoke curling away from fire. My reflection in the window didn't quite match. My own face looked thinner, fainter. No, I breathed, clutching the seat, desperate to hold on to something solid. I'm still here. But the way the driver's smile grew told me he didn't believe that. And worse, maybe I didn't either. Behind us, the officer's radio squawked. The sound felt distant, unreal. My chest rose and fell, shallow breaths scraping like sand. The driver slid back into the sedan, his movements slow, unhurried, as if time itself bowed to him. I tried to reach for the door, tried to shove it open. My hand slipped through the handle like mist. The officer shouted something behind us, his words carried on the night air, but I couldn't catch them. My heartbeat was too loud. Or maybe it wasn't there at all anymore. The sedan's engine growled softly to life. The driver's face remained calm, his eyes locked on the road ahead. And as the car pulled forward, I realized the officer's lights were fading. His shouts, the radio, the siren, all slipping away as if distance wasn't measured in miles but in memory. I tried to scream, tried to force myself into the world again, but the seat beside me stayed empty, and when I looked into the side mirror, I saw nothing at all, not even me. The car rolled on, silent except for the faint flicker of the dying tail light, and I knew I wasn't the hitchhiker anymore. I was something less, something fading, something that had no place on the road except to vanish. The last thing I remember clearly is the patrol car fading behind us, the officer's voice slipping into silence like it had never existed at all. After that, time felt fractured. The white sedan kept moving forward, its headlights carving the road in pieces, but everything else, my own body, my own voice, felt blurred. I don't know how long we drove. Minutes, hours. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I couldn't feel the seat under me anymore. Couldn't feel the door or the handle. When I pressed my hand against the glass, it passed through, leaving only a faint ripple. I was there, but not there. Present, but slipping. The driver didn't speak again. His face was still a shadow, his hands, if they were hands, resting lightly on the wheel. The car itself seemed to hum with something alive, something waiting, and every mile we drove, I felt myself fade more. Then suddenly he slowed. The sedan pulled onto a narrow road, cracked and broken, leading into the dark shell of a small town. No lights, no movement, just the ghost of a place that felt abandoned long before I ever set foot in it. He parked in front of a crumbling building, an old police station, its sign still hanging crooked above the entrance. The driver killed the engine, the silence crashing in like a wave. "Why here?" I whispered, though I didn't know if he could even hear me anymore. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just stepped out of the car, his figure melting into the shadows of the station. And then, for reasons I still can't explain, I followed. The doors groaned as they swung open, hinges screaming against years of rust. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Old desks, overturned chairs, broken glass scattered across the floor. But what caught me were the papers, hundreds of them, strewn everywhere, as if someone had tried to burn them but failed. Among the mess, one stack was untouched. Files, neat and careful, resting on a counter as if waiting. I drifted closer, my hands trembling. My fingers slid through most of the mess, but when I reached for those particular files, they didn't slip away. My hand connected. My grip was real. The first folder bore the title, Accident Report, Highway 63, April 2015. I opened it, the paper stiff and yellowed. Inside were photos. A crushed white sedan, its roof caved in, its body twisted around a tree. The tail light, still faintly visible, hung by a wire, cracked but recognizable. My chest tightened. I flipped the page. Names. The driver, listed as deceased at the scene. Another line below. Unidentified male hitchhiker, late teens, found in back seat. Fatal injuries. No ID recovered. The words blurred. My vision swam. I read them again, slower this time, my hands shaking so hard the paper crinkled. Unidentified. Hitchhiker. Back seat. Fatal. It was me. It had always been me. The memory hit me with the force of the crash itself. I remembered the night 10 years ago, thumb out on the side of the road, desperate for a ride. The white sedan stopping. The driver's calm voice. The feeling of relief when I got inside. And then, the screech of tires, the world flipping, glass shattering, my own body thrown like nothing against the seat. I hadn't survived. I never left that car. The realization hollowed me out. I staggered back, the file slipping from my hands, papers scattering across the dusty floor. My chest heaved, though I had no breath. My pulse raced, though I had no blood. Behind me, I heard it, the soft hum of the sedan's engine alive again. I turned. Through the broken window of the station, I saw it idling under the pale light of the moon, its taillight flickering weakly, endlessly. The driver was standing by the car, watching me. His face was clearer now, pale and sharp, eyes that held the weight of endless miles. He wasn't smiling anymore. He just nodded, slow and certain, like a teacher waiting for a student to understand the lesson. "This is why," he said, his voice low but cutting through the silence. "This is where the road ends." I shook my head, tears burning, even though I didn't know if I still had eyes to cry with. "No, I'm still here." "You're not," he interrupted. "You've been gone for a long time." The words shattered something in me. Because deep down I already knew. The fading, the silence, the way no one could see me, the way the officer's eyes had passed right through. I wasn't alive. I hadn't been for years. The sedan's door opened, slow, inviting. The driver tilted his head toward it. "It's time to finish the ride," he said. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't move that way anymore. I was a shadow of myself, tethered to that car, to that road, to that night 10 years ago, and I realized then the sedan wasn't just a car. It was a vessel, a coffin on wheels. It carried those who didn't belong anymore, hitchhikers like me, passengers who never reached their destination. I stepped toward it, my feet gliding over the broken floor. Outside, the night was still, the world holding its breath. The sedan waited, engine purring like a heart that would never stop. I opened the door, slid inside. The leather was cold, but it held me, solid this time, as if I belonged to it. The driver slipped behind the wheel. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. The engine growled, the headlights flared, and the white sedan pulled away from the station, back onto the endless highway. The road stretched ahead, black and infinite, swallowing everything. I didn't know where it led. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. But as the miles unspooled, I glanced at the license plate in the reflection of the mirror. It was old, dented, the numbers half scraped away. And I knew, if anyone ever ran it, if anyone ever asked, it would trace back to that night. The accident. The deaths. The hitchhiker in the back seat. Me. The sedan rolled on, taillight flickering like a dying star, carrying me deeper into the night. And I understood, with a cold certainty that some passengers never leave the car. They ride forever, flickering between the living and the dead, waiting for someone else foolish enough to see them on the side of the road. Someone like me. I still remember the night it started. It was one of those long shifts, the kind where the road feels endless and the radio chatter fades into background noise. Nothing special was happening. Just a quiet stretch of highway cutting through miles of empty farmland. The kind of quiet that makes you notice every flicker of the dashboard light, every hum of the tires on asphalt. I had the late shift on dispatch. It was almost midnight when the call came through. The voice on the radio was steady, familiar. It was Deputy Miller. He was one of those officers you could count on. He never spooked easy, never let his nerves show. His voice always carried this calm weight, like no matter what, he had it under control. That night, though, there was something in his tone, just a thin layer under the usual calm. Not fear exactly, but a hesitation, a pause before he spoke. "Dispatch, this is 207, he said. "Got eyes on a white pickup. Looks like an older model. Driver's been pacing me for a couple miles. I'm gonna check it out." I clicked my mic. "Copy that, 207. What's your location?" "County Road 16, near the mile marker before the old grain silos." My pen scratched across the logbook. Same as always. Time, location, unit number. But something about writing it down felt heavier than usual, like the ink itself was sinking into the page. He came back on. "Plate looks off. Can't get a clean read? Letters are smeared, or maybe just dirty. Truck's running rough, but the driver's keeping steady behind me. No lights flashing, no signals. I asked him if he wanted backup." He chuckled, soft, almost forced. "Nah, just a routine stop." But I didn't like the way he said it. He pulled the truck over near the tree line. I could hear the engine idling through his mic, faint but present, like a low growl bleeding into the static. He stepped out. I imagined him in the dark, hand on his flashlight, boots crunching gravel. I'd heard this scene play out 100 times, but this one didn't feel the same. "Driver's not moving," he reported. "Windows are tinted. Can't see inside." His breathing was louder than normal, just a bit uneven. The kind of detail you notice only when the silence around it is too deep. I told him again I could send someone his way. He didn't answer right away. Then the mic crackled and his voice came through, low and almost distracted. "He's just sitting there, hands on the wheel, not even looking at me." I asked him what he meant. He didn't explain. Just repeated it, like he was trying to convince himself it was real. "He's not looking at me. Not moving." I felt my stomach twist. I could picture it too clearly. A man sitting perfectly still in a truck that shouldn't even be on the road. The engine rattling, headlights cutting through empty space, and Miller standing there in the dark, caught between duty and some primal warning telling him not to get closer. Static hissed for a few seconds. Then he spoke again. "All right, I'm approaching." Those words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water. I wanted to stop him, to order him back into the car, but I knew he wouldn't listen. That wasn't how Miller worked. His footsteps came through faintly over the mic. 1, 2, 3, each one sharper than the last. I could almost see the beam of his flashlight sliding across the truck's side panels, catching flecks of dirt, scratches, old paint. The picture in my mind grew sharper with every sound. Then, nothing, just dead air. Long enough that I leaned forward in my chair, staring at the radio like I could force it to speak. Finally, his voice. But it was different now. Tight. "Careful. Dispatch," he said. "There's something wrong with the glass. Driver's side window looks warped, like it's bending inward." I didn't know what he meant. I asked him to repeat, but his reply was muffled. His mic caught fragments. "Face too close. Not moving. Another burst of static, harsher this time. It filled my ears with a crawling hiss that made my skin prickle. I heard him exhale sharply, then mutter under his breath. I wasn't even sure if he meant for me to hear it. Doesn't look right. I sat frozen, pen still in my hand, but I couldn't write anymore. I just waited. The seconds dragged, each one heavier than the last. Then came the sharp scrape of his radio against the fabric of his vest. A shuffle of movement. His breathing fast, uneven now. I knew the sound of a cop losing composure. I'd never heard it from Miller before. "Dispatch," he finally said. His words clipped. "Drivers," smiling. That was the last clear thing I got from him that night. The channel stayed open. I could hear the night itself. Crickets, the hum of that old truck, the far-off rustle of wind through the trees. I called his unit again. No reply. Just the steady, open line of his radio, holding on to a silence that didn't feel empty at all. I kept telling myself it was just another stop. Just interference. Just Miller taking his time. But deep down, I knew. I knew something had shifted on that stretch of road. Something we couldn't take back, and that was only the beginning. The line stayed open for longer than it should have. Static hissed in my ear like a warning I couldn't interpret. I must have called his unit number 20 times in a row. No response. Just that hollow noise like the night itself was leaning against the radio. I told myself it was interference. Radios cut out all the time on the back roads, especially near those silos. Dead zones, blind spots, nothing unusual. But the silence pressed too heavy to feel ordinary. Miller's voice had stopped mid-sentence, like he'd been cut away instead of cutting out. I kept his channel open, fingers locked around the mic, eyes glued to the console. Every second stretched longer. I thought I heard something once, breathing maybe, but it dissolved into static before I could decide if it was real. At last, I forced myself to call it in. Unit 207 is unresponsive. Last location, County Road 16 near the grain silos. Request immediate backup. The words tasted wrong in my mouth. 2 units confirmed, both nearby. Their sirens cut through the night within minutes. The sound carried faintly over the airwaves before it faded again. I listened to the echo and felt my chest tighten. I imagined the scene. Miller's cruiser pulled to the side of the road, lights painting the fields red and blue. The truck idling, its driver still as stone. And Miller himself, nowhere I could place. The first responding officer called in. His voice came low, careful. "Dispatch, this is 214. I've got eyes on Miller's cruiser. Driver's side door's open." My pen slipped from my hand. I bent to pick it up, but my fingers trembled so hard I couldn't close around it. Went on. Radio's still active. No sign of Miller, no sign. That phrase crawled up my spine like ice. I asked about the truck. Silence. A pause too long. Then, negative. No vehicle on scene. The word struck harder than I expected. That old white pickup, the one Miller described so clearly, was gone, as if it had never been there. Fourn's partner joined the search. They circled the cruiser, checked the ditches, the tree line. Their flashlights swept over gravel and weeds, beams slicing the dark. They reported back in clipped bursts. Nothing. No tracks. Area clear. But I didn't believe it. I could still hear Miller's voice in my head, repeating the things that made no sense. "He's not moving. The glass is warped." He's smiling. Those details clung to me, heavy and sharp, even as the officers found nothing to explain them. The backup checked inside the cruiser. Engine off. Keys still in the ignition. Radio mic hanging loose, like it had slipped from his hand. The seatbelt unlatched. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just absence. They searched further, 1/2 mile in both directions, the silos, even the shallow ditch that filled with weeds every summer. Nothing. The night swallowed every trace. One of them picked up the mic and spoke. His voice came over the line, rough with unease. "Dispatch, all we've got is the unit and the radio. Miller's not here." I wanted to argue, to demand they look again, but I heard the truth in their tone. They weren't overlooking him. He was gone. Simply gone. Still, the worst part wasn't the empty car or the missing deputy or the truck that seemed to vanish with him. The worst part was the sound that came after. They were about to clear the scene when Miller's channel crackled again, a burst of static, sharp and loud. Then his voice. Not live, not steady, just fragments. Copy that? Routine, then silence. Another burst. Driver's side, silence. The backup froze. Their radios all carried the same noise. Miller's voice breaking through in pieces, words cut off, unfinished. One of the officers muttered, "Jesus Christ." I sat in my chair with my hand over my mouth. I knew his voice. I'd know it in a crowd, half buried under interference, even warped and thinned by distance. It was him. "Miller, can you copy?" I asked, though my throat felt raw. No reply. Just another slice of words, too faint to hold together. Smiling. The officers tried to trace it, triangulate if maybe his radio had been dropped in the field, hidden somewhere nearby. They swept the grass, searched every hollow, climbed the lip of the ditch. Nothing. But the voice kept coming, short bursts on Channel 9, then silence. Almost like a recording. Almost. But never quite the same twice. After 30 minutes, it stopped. Dead silence. The officers packed up, one of them swearing under his breath, the other speaking too calmly, like he was convincing himself more than me. They left the cruiser to be towed. They filed their report. They called it an active disappearance. But I didn't leave my chair. Not right away. I sat there long after the line went dead, staring at the logbook, at Miller's last words written in my own handwriting. Driver smiling, I couldn't close the book. Couldn't bring myself to lift the pen again, because I kept hearing him. Not on the radio now, not out loud, but inside my head, as if his last transmission had embedded itself into me, a steady whisper repeating over and over, "He's not moving. He's smiling." And the silence after carried the weight of something I still can't name. Something waiting, patient, out there on the road where he vanished. We never found him. Not a footprint, not a trace. Just his car, his radio, and that broken voice bleeding through the static long after he was gone. That was the night we stopped pretending the roads were empty. That was the night I realized a missing deputy was only the surface of something deeper, something we had no language for. But the worst was still to come. Because the radio didn't stay quiet for long. Weeks passed, but the silence never sat right. Miller was gone, his cruiser cleaned and locked away, his name etched into the missing persons file. The department tried to carry on, but I could feel it in the way voices changed over the radio. Shorter words, longer pauses. Nobody said it out loud. But every time a unit called in, we all listened harder, waiting for the static to break again. I kept replaying that night in my head, his last words circling like a record with a broken groove, driver smiling. It was written in my logs, burned into the edges of my mind. And though the higher-ups ordered us to treat it like a disappearance, I couldn't convince myself that's what it was. It didn't feel like he vanished. It felt like he was still out there, caught between transmission and silence. The first time it happened again, I thought I was losing my grip. It was near the end of a slow shift, radios mostly quiet. Then, out of nowhere, Channel 9 lit up with static. Not sharp this time, low, stretched, like wind dragging across the wires. And beneath it a voice. "Copy that," I froze. My hand hovered over the mic, but I didn't press it. I knew the voice. I'd know it anywhere. "It was Miller." Routine. His words fractured, half swallowed by the noise. My heart hammered as I leaned closer, as though being closer to the console would make it clearer. Driver's side. The room felt colder. I whispered his name under my breath, not daring to key in the mic. If it was real, I didn't want to break it. If it wasn't, I didn't want anyone to know I was hearing ghosts. The sound faded. Silence filled the room again. I sat with my hand pressed hard to my chest, like I could slow the beating down. I didn't report it. Not that night. But 2 days later, another dispatcher did. She leaned over to me during the shift and said, "Did you hear that?" It was Miller. Her voice cracked when she said his name. Soon more of us began to admit it. Not often, not regular, but always on Channel 9. A burst of static, a handful of broken words, always his voice, clipped off in the middle of a thought. One night, a younger deputy heard it while driving his route. He pulled over, called it in, said it felt like Miller was in the seat beside him, whispering into the mic. The kid didn't last long after that. Transferred out, said he couldn't handle the radio anymore. The transmissions never lined up exactly. Sometimes it was, "Copy that." Sometimes, smiling. Sometimes just a breath, long and ragged, like he was still standing out on that dark road. It didn't follow a pattern, and that made it worse. The chief ordered the radios checked. Maintenance teams combed through every wire, every channel. They blamed old towers, faulty connections, feedback loops. But no matter how many times they cleared it, the voice kept coming back. Always Miller's, always unfinished. I started dreading night shifts. The console lights glared too bright against the dark, and the static began to feel alive like it was waiting for me. Some nights I thought I could hear him before he spoke, like the silence itself bent a little, making room for him. One night, I made the mistake of answering. He came through clearer than before. "I can't see." Warped glass. I pressed the mic, my voice shaking. "Miller, it's dispatch. Where are you?" Static swallowed his reply. Then faintly, "He's still smiling." The hair on my arms rose. My throat closed. Another burst of noise, then silence. The room felt wrong, like someone had just walked through it, brushing past me in the dark. I sat there breathing too fast, waiting for more, but the channels stayed dead. After that, I stopped logging the events. I couldn't keep writing his words like they were just another call. It didn't feel right. It felt like giving him a second death every time I scratched them down on paper. But I listened. God, I listened. Every night I waited for him to bleed through the static again. Not because I wanted to hear it, because I couldn't stop myself. Because the silence between transmissions grew unbearable, and I needed proof that I hadn't imagined him. And every time he came back, it was the same. Never a full report, never a plea for help, just fragments, half-thoughts, cut short, as if he was still trapped in that moment by the truck, like he never left it. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe he's still standing there on County Road 16, flashlight beam trembling on the warped glass, staring at a driver who won't move, won't blink, won't stop smiling, and maybe he's calling us because we're the only ones still listening. I thought it would end. I told myself night after night that the radio would finally stay quiet, that Miller's voice would fade like an old memory. But ghosts don't follow rules. They linger, pressing themselves into cracks we can't close. And his voice stayed with us, rattling through static when the air was too still. The others stopped mentioning it after a while. Some pretended they didn't hear. Others got jumpy, transferring out or switching shifts to daylight hours. Nobody wanted to admit we were all listening to the same thing. But then the truck came back. It was late, always late, when the call came through. A deputy on patrol, nervous voice cutting over the line. "Dispatch, this is 213. Got eyes on an older white pickup. Heading south on Route 11. The words made my blood run cold. A continued, "Plates are unreadable. Driver's keeping steady. No erratic moves, but..." He trailed off like he was trying to decide if he sounded crazy. Then he said it. "Looks like someone I know." My hand clenched the pen so hard the plastic cracked. He slowed his voice, steadying it. "Driver matches the description of Deputy Miller." I couldn't breathe. For a moment, the entire room seemed to fold in on itself. Miller had been missing for weeks. His car found, his voice lingering, but no body. And now he was behind the wheel of the same truck that swallowed him. I asked for confirmation. The deputy's reply came sharp, like he wanted to convince himself too. "It's him. Same uniform, same face, but older, different." His breathing quickened over the mic. "Dispatch, his skin looks..." Wrong, pale, like it's been left out in the sun too long. And his eyes, Jesus. His eyes are sunk back, but he's smiling. The word cut through me like a blade. Smiling. The same detail Miller gave me that night. The thing he couldn't shake before his voice cut out for good. Kept reporting, his words rushed now, fear breaking through the calm. He's not blinking, just driving. Hands on the wheel, smile on his face. Looks straight ahead like he doesn't even see me following. I told him to keep distance, to wait for backup. His voice shook as he answered. "Copy that. But I swear he knows I'm here. He hasn't looked once, but he knows." The silence between his transmissions was unbearable. I pressed the mic, demanded updates, begged for him to hold back. Each time he answered, his tone was thinner, like the road itself was stripping him down. Finally, he whispered, "Dispatch! He's slowing down!" The static stretched. I waited, pen hovering, sweat sliding cold down my neck. Then his voice cracked through again. "Truck's pulling over. By the tree line." My heart hammered. The same place, the same stretch of road. His breathing filled the line. A pause. "I'm not getting out." I told him to stay in the car, to wait. Backup was already on the way, but then the channel hissed. Not static, breathing, deep, ragged, drawn close to the mic. I thought it was 213 at first, but it wasn't his rhythm. It was heavier, slower, and underneath it, so faint I wanted to deny it, I heard laughter, not loud, just a low, steady chuckle. Then 213's voice broke back in, frantic now. "He's out of the truck. Got dispatch, he's walking toward me. Same uniform, same badge, but it's not him." "It can't be him!" The sound warped, like the radio itself recoiled. Static rushed, carrying pieces of words. "Drivers!" "Side." "Glass." "Smiling." Miller's voice. Again, layered over 213's panic, as if the radio couldn't decide which of them was speaking. Clay shouted, "Stay back!" "Stay." The transmission cut. I called his unit over and over. Nothing. Just the hiss of open air, the silence that never felt empty anymore. Backup found the scene half an hour later. 213's cruiser sat by the tree line, driver's door open, radio hanging loose, engine still running. No sign of him, but the truck was gone again. I sat alone in dispatch, staring at the console lights, my throat locked tight. Miller was gone. Now 213 was gone, and the road was still out there, waiting. Channel 9 hissed softly, like a breath too close to the ear. And then, just for a second, two voices at once. Routine stop. "He's still smiling." I dropped the mic. I don't even remember closing the logbook, because that's when I realized something I wish I could forget. The truck doesn't just take them, it brings them back. My shift usually starts before the sun even thinks about rising. That stretch of highway always feels like it doesn't belong to the rest of the world. Too quiet. Too empty. Just black asphalt and endless mirrors of taillights stretching into the dark. I've been a highway patrol officer long enough to know the rhythm of the road, the stops, the accidents, the drunks, the people too tired to keep their eyes open. But that morning, the rhythm broke. The first car was a silver sedan pulled off onto the shoulder, hazard lights ticking like a heartbeat. I parked behind it, got out, and walked up, my flashlight sweeping across the rear window. The driver was a middle-aged man, stiff at the wheel, both hands gripping it like he was afraid it might vanish. I knocked on the glass. He jumped, then rolled the window down an inch. His face looked pale in the beam of my light. "You okay, sir?" I asked. He nodded too quickly. Yeah, just needed a second." Something about him made me pause. His eyes kept darting, not to me, not to the road, but to his own rear-view mirror. I followed his gaze. The mirror was tilted right at me, catching my face in its reflection. Except it wasn't me. Not exactly. The shape was right, the uniform, the flashlight, but the reflection's mouth hung open like it was screaming, even though I was silent. I blinked hard, took a step back. When I looked again, it was normal. Just my own tired face staring back. The man must have seen me falter, because he whispered, "You saw it too, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I told him to rest a bit before getting back on the road, then walked back to my cruiser. But even then, even in my own side mirror, my reflection looked wrong. Like the glass was a pond, rippling at the edges. I shook it off. Lack of sleep, that's all. But then came the second car, a minivan with its hood up, smoke curling into the air. A woman stood by it, her kids huddled in the back seat. She thanked me when I pulled over, said she'd already called a tow. But while she spoke, her eyes never left the side mirror on the van. I glanced at it without thinking, and froze. The kids in the reflection weren't moving. They sat perfectly still, faces pale, eyes glassy, like dolls propped in the back seat. Yet when I looked through the real window, the kids were shifting, whispering, alive. I had to bite my tongue not to react. The woman leaned closer, her voice cracking. "It's in the glass, isn't it?" "You see it too." That sent a shiver down my spine. She said it like she'd been waiting for me to confirm something she already knew. I told her to stay calm, told her help was on the way. But when I turned back to my cruiser, every reflective surface I passed, her rear view, her side mirrors, even the chrome of her bumper, showed pieces of me that weren't mine. My eyes too wide, my jaw slack, my body twisted slightly wrong. By the third stop, I stopped pretending it was nothing. An old truck sat parked under an overpass. No hazards, no driver visible. I approached with caution, hand on my holster. The driver, a gaunt man in his 60s, sat slumped forward. When I tapped the window, he jerked awake like he'd been drowning in sleep. He didn't roll down the glass. He just raised a shaking hand and pointed at the rearview mirror. I leaned closer, and what I saw there rooted me to the spot. My reflection had no eyes, just two black pits where they should have been. Yet I could feel it looking at me, the weight of its gaze pressing against my skull. I stumbled back, my boots scraping the gravel. The man inside croaked, "It started yesterday. They're showing us what we don't want to see." I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't answer. He just kept pointing at the mirror like it was more important than his own heartbeat. I left him there. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't stand near that truck another second. Back in my cruiser, I adjusted my own mirror, staring at my face. This time the distortion was worse. My skin looked too thin, my teeth too sharp, like I was decaying and fast forward. I gripped the wheel hard, trying to breathe. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe highway patrol had finally burned me out. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just me. The drivers had seen it too. The reflections were changing, showing things that shouldn't be there. I told myself I'd finish the shift, just get through the night. But the stops kept coming, car after car, driver after driver. Every single one of them sat frozen in fear, refusing to look at their own mirrors. Some had covered them with jackets, with rags, with duct tape. One guy had even smashed his completely, glass scattered across the seat. And every time I looked into their mirrors, I saw myself falling apart. Sometimes it was subtle, an extra shadow under the eyes, a twitch in the mouth. Other times it was grotesque, my neck bent at an impossible angle, my hands clawing at my own throat. The worst was a woman in a dark SUV. She kept whispering to herself, rocking back and forth. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "It keeps following me," in every reflection. "It won't stop." I looked. I shouldn't have, but I looked. And there I was, in her mirror, standing right behind her, even though I was still outside, leaning by the window. My reflection's hands were raised, like it was about to grab her shoulders. I jerked away, my stomach turning. That was when I started covering my own mirrors. A piece of paper over the rear view, my jacket thrown over the side ones. Driving blind felt safer than watching myself rot, but even then the glass wouldn't leave me alone. I swear I saw it in storefront windows as I passed, in the sheen of other cars, even in the shimmer of the asphalt when headlights struck it just right. Always me, always wrong. Toward the end of my shift, I pulled over at a rest stop just to breathe. I sat in the dark, hands trembling on the wheel. My chest ached, my throat dry. I thought about the drivers I'd seen, the ones too scared to keep moving, the ones already broken. And I wondered how long before I joined them. When I finally dared to peel the paper off my rear view, I told myself it was just to prove there was nothing there. Just a mirror. Just me. But what stared back wasn't me. Not anymore. The face was familiar, yes. The same shape, the same features, but warped like melted wax. The eyes too deep, the mouth stretched too wide. It leaned forward, pressing against the glass like it wanted out. I slammed the paper back up, my pulse hammering. I don't know what's happening on that stretch of highway. I don't know why every mirror shows the same sickness, the same decay. But I can feel it spreading. Every time I blink, I see that face behind my eyes. Every time I breathe, I wonder if the next driver I stop will already be too far gone, and I can't shake the thought, the one that keeps me awake long after my shift ends. What if the reflections aren't lying? What if they're not showing what isn't real? What if they're showing what's coming? I thought the mirrors were the worst of it. Thought if I kept them covered, if I avoided the glass, I could outrun whatever sickness was creeping through that stretch of highway. But the road has a way of finding you. It was past midnight when I saw the car. Same flashing hazards, same lonely hum of the engine parked on the shoulder just before the county line. I slowed, routine kicking in like muscle memory. I'd done this 1,000 times before. Pull over, lights on, step out. But when my headlights cut across the car's paint, my chest went tight. It wasn't just any car. It was my car, my cruiser. The same model, same color, same plates. Parked neat on the shoulder like it had been waiting for me. For a second, I thought I was losing it. Maybe exhaustion had pushed me over the edge. Maybe I'd circled the same stretch of highway without realizing. But no, my own cruiser idled steady behind me, engine purring. I could hear it, feel it humming under my boots. So whose car was that? I stepped closer, flashlight trembling in my grip. The beams swept across the windows and my stomach dropped, because sitting inside behind the wheel was me. Not distorted, not decayed, not the warped reflection I'd grown used to. This was me, whole and solid, dressed in the same uniform, hands resting calmly on the wheel. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't move at all. Just stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a thin line as if waiting for something. I tapped the glass with my light. "Step out of the car!" My own voice came back to me, muffled through the window. Only it wasn't an echo. It was him. He turned his head, eyes meeting mine, and in the exact same tone said, "Step out of the car." My breath caught. The night air felt too heavy to swallow. I reached for the handle but stopped. The door was locked. Of course it was. He raised his hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed at my cruiser. I spun around and froze, because in the driver's seat of my own cruiser, I was sitting there too. My head turned toward me, my eyes black and empty, hands folded neatly on the wheel. I staggered back, my flashlight beam swinging wild across the asphalt. Both cars idled steady, both cabins filled with the same figure, me waiting, watching. I didn't know which one was real anymore. My radio crackled on my belt. Static first, then a voice that made my blood run cold. "Pull over." It was my voice, flat, commanding. I yanked the radio free, slammed the button. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." Only static answered. And underneath it, faint but clear, the sound of breathing. My breathing. I wanted to leave, to run, to put the car in gear and tear down that highway without looking back. But my legs felt rooted to the ground, like the asphalt itself had swallowed them. So I did the only thing I could. I opened the door of the second cruiser. The hinges creaked like bones snapping. The air inside smelled sharp, metallic, like old blood and burned wires. My own face turned toward me, smooth and calm, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Get in," he said. Not shouted, not begged, just stated, like an order already given. I shook my head. My mouth was too dry to speak. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought he might step out, might try to drag me in himself. But he didn't move. He just waited. Behind me, my own cruiser's engine roared louder, like it was alive. I glanced back. The other me inside sat perfectly still, hands tightening on the wheel. The headlights flared bright, flooding the asphalt with white. When I turned back to the second cruiser, the seat was empty. Empty, except for the rearview mirror. It tilted toward me on its own, the glass catching my face. And there it was again, my reflection, but wrong. Its skin rippled like water, its smile cut too wide. It mouthed something I couldn't hear. I stumbled back, pulse hammering in my ears. The night had gone so quiet that every breath felt deafening. Then the radio on my belt whispered, "Pull over yourself." Not a warning, not advice, a command. I didn't remember running back to my cruiser. Didn't remember slamming the door or tearing down the highway, the lights of the second car fading behind me. All I remember is the road unspooling in front of me, black and endless, and my mirrors rattling against the wind. I tried not to look, but the glass pulled at me. In the rear view, I wasn't alone. The back seat held a shape, my shape, sitting upright, eyes wide and unblinking. Its head leaned just enough that I could see the whites of its teeth in the dark. I ripped the mirror down and threw it onto the passenger seat. But the side mirrors still held me, still warped my face into something jagged and cruel. I kept driving. Miles blurred into nothing. The road signs all looked the same. And then, Headlights appeared ahead. Another cruiser. Parked neatly on the shoulder, my throat closed. I slowed, heart pounding, because deep down I already knew. The same car, the same reflection waiting inside. Only this time, when I passed, the figure in the driver's seat smiled. Not a warped grin. Not a distorted mockery. A calm, knowing smile like he'd already won. I pressed harder on the gas. The speedometer climbed. The engine howled. But the road stretched longer, wider, as if the highway itself didn't want to let me leave. Every mile marker blurred into the same number. Every exit ramp circled back onto the same stretch. And in every reflection, my windows, my dash, even the gleam of the speedometer, I saw myself, multiplying, filling the glass like cracks in a mirror. Each one moved slightly different. One turned its head when I didn't. One grinned when I clenched my jaw. One pressed its palms against the glass like it was trapped inside. The longer I drove, the less certain I was that I was behind the wheel at all. Because in the reflections, they were the ones driving. At some point, I lost track of which car was mine. The highway was lined with cruisers now, all identical, all idling with their headlights on. And in every single one, I sat waiting. Some stared blankly ahead. Some pressed their foreheads to the glass. Some mouthed words I couldn't hear. But they were all me. Everywhere I looked, I was already pulled over, and that's when I understood. The voice on the radio hadn't been telling me to stop. It hadn't been warning me at all. It was giving me the truth. You don't pull over the car in front of you. You don't pull over another driver. You pull over yourself. I don't know which version of me is telling this story now. Maybe I'm still on that highway, circling the same mile forever. Maybe I'm one of the reflections pounding at the glass, hoping someone notices. Or maybe I never left that first car at all. Maybe I've been sitting there the whole time, hands on the wheel, waiting for the real me to finally step out. But if you ever drive that stretch of road at night, if you ever see a cruiser on the shoulder with its lights flashing, don't stop, because the man inside won't be waiting for your license or registration. He'll be waiting for you, and when you look into his eyes, you'll see your own. Most traffic stops are routine. You notice something off. You hit the lights, you pull them over, and 9 times out of 10, it's nothing more than a ticket. That night, it started like any other stop. A black SUV ahead of me, cruising steady in the right lane. No plates, no dealer tag, no temp sticker in the window, just a wide, dark vehicle gliding down the highway like it didn't belong anywhere. I lit it up. Blue and red flashing against the asphalt. Usually drivers swerve a bit, fumble, show they're nervous. This one didn't. The SUV slowed with perfect control like it had been expecting me all along. I pulled up behind, radioed it in, then stepped out. The night was still, too still. Even the hum of traffic in the distance felt muted, like the world was holding its breath. Walking toward that SUV, something about it already felt wrong. The paint was too black. Not just dark, but flat, like it swallowed the light from my flashlight instead of reflecting it. The tinted windows looked almost solid, as if someone had poured ink across the glass. I stopped at the driver's side. My beam swept across the window, but the light just died there, eaten by the tint. I couldn't see an outline of the driver, not even a shape. "Evening," I said, voice steady out of habit. "License and registration." For a long time, nothing happened. Then the window started to roll down. I braced myself, hand hovering near my holster. But instead of revealing a face, or even a hint of the interior, the glass slid away to nothing but pure black. Not shadow, not dim light, just darkness. A hollow absence, like the inside of that SUV was a tunnel with no end. My flashlight beam didn't touch it. It stopped at the edge of the frame, cut clean off like the laws of physics had decided not to apply inside that car. "Sir?" I tried again. My throat had gone dry. "Step out of the vehicle." Silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty but heavy. I could feel it pressing on my ears, the way deep water presses on your chest when you dive too far down. I shifted, leaned closer, half expecting to hear breathing, movement, something. All I caught was a faint hum, low and steady, almost like the sound of tires on pavement, but slower, dragged out, unnatural. I've dealt with people hiding in cars before. Drunks, fugitives, scared kids. But this was different. There was no shuffle, no smell of smoke, no weight shifting inside, just the open window and that darkness staring back at me. I told myself to stay calm. I raised my flashlight higher, tried to angle it deeper, but it was like shining into a wall. Nothing. Not even dust. Then the SUV's engine gave a little growl, low and guttural like it was clearing its throat. I stepped back fast, my boots crunching gravel. My hand was on my weapon, now safety off. But the SUV didn't move. It just idled there, humming, the window open like a mouth that refused to show its teeth. The radio at my shoulder crackled. Dispatch asked for my status. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught. How do you explain that you've stopped a car with no driver? That its windows don't reveal light, only emptiness? I managed. Vehicles pulled over. Occupant is uncooperative. My voice sounded weak, not like mine. They asked if I needed backup. I wanted to say yes. I should have said yes. But something in me didn't want anyone else near that SUV. Like it was mine to deal with, or maybe like it was dangerous to share. I told them I was fine. That was the first lie. I edged closer again, careful, every nerve screaming at me to leave. I raised my voice. Step out of the car. Now. That's when I realized the window on the back seat was lowering too. Slow, deliberate. More blackness spilled out, spilling into the night like smoke. My flashlight didn't catch anything. My skin prickled, every hair on my arm standing up. It felt like the SUV wasn't showing me an interior at all. It was showing me an opening. Like if I leaned too close, I might fall straight into it and never hit the bottom. I staggered back again, nearly tripping on the shoulder. The engine revved, then settled. Almost like laughter. I should have called it in properly. Should have asked for backup, boxed the car in, done everything by the book. Instead, I froze, watching that black interior breathe against the night. And then, as if bored of me, the windows rolled back up. One by one, they sealed shut, erasing the darkness like it had never been there. The SUV idled a moment longer. Then, without a sound, it pulled back onto the highway. No squeal of tires, no crunch of gravel. Just smooth, gliding motion as if the road bent to let it through. I scrambled back into my cruiser, lights still flashing. I tried to follow, but the SUV had already merged into the stream of headlights ahead. Except, it didn't look like it was among them. It looked separate. A shadow floating between cars, untouched by headlights, never gaining distance but never falling behind. I tailed it for miles, heart pounding, waiting for a chance to light it up again. But each time I thought I was closing in, it seemed to stretch away, the distance shifting like the road itself was lying to me. Finally, near the next exit, it vanished. One blink, it was there. The next, gone. No turn, no off-ramp, just erased. I pulled over, breathing hard, gripping the wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. When dispatch checked in again, I told them the vehicle had fled. That was lie number 2. The truth was, it hadn't fled at all, because when I looked in my side mirror, the SUV was still there, not behind me, not on the road, inside the mirror. Its headlights glowed faint and hollow, pressing against the glass like they wanted through. I tore my eyes away, covered the mirror with my hand. My pulse wouldn't settle, no matter how many deep breaths I forced. The SUV was gone when I dared to look again. The highway was empty, too empty. But I knew this wasn't over, because the windows didn't just hide nothing. They hid something, and for the first time in my career, I realized I wasn't the one doing the stop. I was the one being stopped, and whatever was in that SUV had decided I wasn't free to go. I told myself I'd imagined it. The black SUV, the impossible darkness inside, the way it moved without sound. I convinced myself that maybe it was fatigue. Maybe the night had gotten under my skin, but I knew I was lying. Because 3 nights later, it was back. I was on a different stretch of highway this time. No moon, no stars, just the thin glow of my headlights cutting through the dark. I saw the SUV parked on the shoulder before I even realized I was looking for it. Same pitch black paint, same heavy tint, no plates. I slowed, heart climbing into my throat. My cruiser's engine sounded too loud against the stillness. The SUV didn't move, just sat there, angled slightly toward the road like a predator crouched in tall grass. Against my better judgment, I pulled behind it. My hands felt numb as I radioed in, my voice shaky. I told dispatch the same thing as before. Vehicle, no plates, tinted windows. But I didn't tell them the truth. That this wasn't the first time. That this wasn't normal. As I stepped out, the night felt colder than it should have. A wet, biting cold that sank under my skin. I walked up slowly, flashlight shaking in my grip. My boots scuffed against the shoulder, each sound too loud, too fragile. The window rolled down before I even reached it. Just like last time. And just like last time, there was nothing. No driver. No seats. Just that endless black. My stomach tightened. My throat ached. I thought about calling for backup, but the idea of another deputy walking up to this car made me sick. This thing, whatever it was, felt personal. Like it was mine to face. I leaned closer, careful, trying to listen. That same faint hum came from the void, low and steady, vibrating in my teeth. I thought I was ready for it. I thought I'd seen the worst it could show me. Then I heard it. Laughter, high-pitched, sharp. The kind of laughter only children make when they're playing a game, when they think no one's watching. I froze. The sound drifted up from inside the SUV, bubbling up from that black nothing like water boiling under the surface. At first I thought maybe I'd misheard, that it was a radio or kid somewhere nearby, but the road was empty for miles. There were no houses, no playgrounds, no reason for laughter to echo in the middle of nowhere. I leaned closer, against every instinct I had. The laughter grew louder. It wasn't just one child. It was many, layered voices, overlapping, rising and falling, the way kids sound on a schoolyard when the bell rings. But something about it felt wrong. There was no air in it, no breath between the giggles. Just sound sharp and constant like it wasn't being made by lungs. Hello? My voice cracked. Who's in there? The laughter stopped. Dead. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Thick, suffocating. My ears rang with it, then clear as day, a small voice whispered from the darkness. Play with us. My blood went ice cold. I stumbled back, flashlight beam shaking across the SUV's door. The window was still open, the black inside shifting like smoke. Another voice chimed in, higher, eager. Come inside. It's fun. My skin crawled. My brain screamed at me to run, to get back in my cruiser and never look back. But my feet stayed planted, like the asphalt had turned to tar around my boots. I forced my radio to my mouth. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped it. Dispatch, I rasped. I've got something unusual here. Requesting backup. Static filled my ear. Then, faint, distant, the sound of children laughing again. From my radio. I dropped it, heart pounding, breath ragged. The laughter spilled from the speaker, rising, overlapping, until it filled the night around me. Stop it, I muttered, pressing my palms to my ears. Stop it! But it didn't stop. The SUV's engine roared to life, headlights flaring bright, blinding. I staggered back, throwing up a hand against the light. The laughter kept pouring out, louder, sharper, pressing against my skull until I thought it might split me open. And then, all at once, silence. The headlights cut. The engine died. The SUV was dark again, still as stone. I stood there, shaking, staring at it, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. The windows were sealed, the car was quiet, the night swallowed every sound. Finally, I forced myself back into my cruiser. My hands trembled on the wheel, sweat slicking my palms even though the air was freezing. I drove. I don't know how long or how far, only that I kept the speed steady, my eyes fixed on the road. But the laughter didn't leave me. I heard it in the whine of my tires, in the hiss of the wind through the cracks in the door. Every noise stretched itself into that sound. Children giggling, whispering, waiting. By the time I made it back to the station, I was half convinced I'd lost my mind. I didn't file the report. I didn't tell a soul. How could I? How do you explain that you pulled over a car with no plates, no driver, no interior, but full of children's voices? I tried to sleep that morning. Laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart still pounding. And just as I drifted into that fragile space between waking and dreams, I heard it again. Faint, distant, children laughing. From outside my window. I jolted upright, blinds trembling under my hand as I pulled them open. Nothing. Just the street. The parked cars. The pale morning light spilling across the pavement. But I knew it hadn't been my imagination, because the sound was still there. Faint, soft, like it was sinking into the walls. And when I looked in the reflection of the glass, just for a second, I thought I saw headlights. 2 pale orbs glowing in the dark, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep again that day, or the day after, and I can't shake the feeling that the laughter isn't something I heard, it's something I let in. I thought maybe the laughter would fade if I ignored it, that if I pushed it down far enough, buried it under work and routine, it would eventually dissolve into memory. But it didn't. It followed me, even off duty. Even at home, I couldn't escape it. The first time I saw the SUV outside my house, it was just past midnight. I'd fallen asleep in the recliner, uniform shirt still half-buttoned, TV hissing low static because I hadn't bothered changing the channel. A noise woke me. A low rumble, steady, vibrating through the walls. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor's car. But when I stepped to the window, pulled the blinds just enough to peek outside, my stomach dropped. There it was, parked across the street, engine idling. A black SUV with no plates. Its headlights were off, but I knew it. I knew that shape too well. I froze there, watching, waiting for something to happen. But the SUV didn't move. Didn't leave. It just sat, humming, the way a predator hums in its sleep. I told myself not to panic. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe someone new on the block. Maybe a visitor. But deep down, I knew. And when I finally tore myself from the window, heart hammering, I heard it. Children laughing. Soft at first, coming from the street, curling through the glass like smoke, then louder, filling the house. I stumbled back, pressing my palms to my ears. The sound didn't muffle. It was inside now, bouncing against the walls, trickling down the hallway. I grabbed my gun. It felt stupid, holding a weapon against a sound. But I couldn't help it. My hands shook as I checked the locks, every shadow stretching longer than it should. The laughter swelled and dropped, swirled and scattered, always just out of reach. It wasn't playful anymore. It was mocking. I wanted to storm outside, to confront it, to end this thing before it could root itself any deeper into me. But something inside whispered that stepping outside would be a mistake, that the SUV wasn't waiting for me to fight it. It was waiting for me to join it. So I sat in the dark instead, gun heavy in my lap, staring at the blinds as the laughter rattled around me. By dawn, the SUV was gone. The street empty, but the laughter never stopped. I heard it at the station, faint under the static of the radio. I heard it in the grocery store, woven into the squeak of a shopping cart. I heard it in the shower, trickling through the pipes. It was everywhere. And every time I looked outside at night, the SUV was there. Sometimes across the street. Sometimes parked a block away, its shape barely visible under the streetlight. But always close, always waiting. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. My body ran on coffee and nerves, my hands trembling so bad I could hardly write reports. The other deputies noticed, of course. Asked if I was okay. I lied again and again. Because how do you explain that your house is haunted not by a ghost, but by a car? The third week, it got worse. I woke at 3 in the morning to find every light in my house on. I knew I hadn't left them that way. My stomach twisted as I walked from room to room, flicking switches, the silence thick around me. When I reached the kitchen, I froze. The back door was wide open. Cold air drifted in, carrying the faint sound of giggling. I raised my gun, every muscle locked tight. My breath fogged in the chill. And then, from somewhere outside, a dozen voices sang together, low and soft, like a nursery rhyme. Come outside. Come outside. My chest seized. I slammed the door shut, locked it, bolted it, but the voices kept pressing against the walls. I could hear them circling the house, skipping, running, their laughter slapping against the windows like hands. I dropped to the floor, pressing my back against the cabinet, gun shaking in my lap. My throat ached from holding my breath. It felt like hours before it faded. When I finally dared to peek out again, the SUV was parked right at the end of my driveway. No headlights, no sound. Just there, waiting. I started sleeping at the station after that. Told myself it was paperwork, long shifts, anything but fear. But even there, I couldn't escape it. One night in the squad room, I heard the laughter again. Clear, right behind me. I spun around, gun drawn. The room was empty, but on the far wall in the darkened glass of the bulletin board, I saw headlights. Two white eyes glowing, and the faint outline of that black SUV pressed against the reflection. I nearly pulled the trigger on nothing but glass. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The laughter never leaves now. It's in my ears when I wake. It's in my skull when I try to think. Sometimes I catch myself smiling when I hear it, like I've started to understand the joke, and that terrifies me more than anything. Last night, it parked directly in front of my house. Not across the street, not down the block. Right in front. The headlights came on. Not blinding, not bright, just a soft glow that filled the room through the blinds. And in that glow, I saw shadows moving. Small shapes darting back and forth in the beams, their laughter spilling louder than ever. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then slowly, the SUV's windows began to roll down. And this time, the darkness inside wasn't empty. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass. Children's faces, pale, grinning, eyes too wide. Their lips moved in unison, but the sound that came out wasn't words. It was the same jagged laughter, sharper now, like teeth grinding together. My knees buckled. My vision swam. For a moment, I thought I was going to collapse right there, dragged under by the sound. But when I blinked, the SUV was gone. No headlights. No laughter, just an empty street, quiet and calm, like nothing had ever been there at all. I haven't left the house since. Can't bring myself to. I sit by the window at night, gun in my lap. Blinds cracked just enough to see. And every night, without fail, it comes back. The same black SUV, idling at the curb, the same children laughing, never stopping, never breathing, and I know one of these nights, the door will open and they'll be waiting for me, not to hurt me, not to kill me, but to let me in.